Ned Stark stood by the window in his private solar, the parchment in his hands trembling as if the words scrawled upon it possessed a power he had never before known. They did. This piece of paper bore the secret that could topple the very foundations of the Seven Kingdoms. Joffrey, the newly titled prince, was not of Baratheon blood. The truth whispered that the boy was born of incest between Queen Cersei Lannister and her twin brother, Ser Jaime. That alone would be cause enough for scandal and upheaval. But the shock that coursed through Ned's veins stemmed from deeper sources. Robert Baratheon, the king he had served so faithfully, the friend he had loved, lay dying without knowing the fate he was leaving for his realm. He read the words again, wanting to be absolutely certain there was no mistake. He had uncovered the truth through painstaking observation and subtle, not always cautious inquiries. It was obvious now that the delicate tapestry of names in the lineage books had matched in an all-too-perfect pattern. Black-haired Baratheons going back generations, with none but the final 3 royal children crowned with Lannister gold. Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen, their hair, the hue of beaten gold, set them apart from any Baratheon scion Ned had heard of. He let the parchment drop to the small table near the window. Night was descending, blanketing King's Landing in a cloak of gloom. Torchlight flickered below in the courtyard of the Red Keep, and the faint sounds of the city drifted upward, carried by the stirring wind. There was the echo of laughter from the common folk, the yelp of dogs, and somewhere an argument from a drunken pair. These noises reminded him that though the high lords and ladies quarreled over crowns, the small folk carried on with their daily struggles, unaware of the tremors of change that threatened to shatter the order of their world. He exhaled, turning to the door where Peter Baelish, Littlefinger, stood quietly, arms folded behind his back. The Master of Coin's gray-green eyes seemed to glimmer in the dim candlelight, and that wry smile he always wore toyed with his lips. Until this very day, Ned had not known how far he could trust Peter. Catelyn had once told him of Peter's youthful arrogance, his infatuation with her, his cunning. She had also related that though Littlefinger might be self-serving, he was not without his sense of pride and possible grudges. But now, as Ned was ready to place his next move, he needed alliances. He had the gold cloaks, he had the paper bearing King Robert's last wishes, and he might have the ear of Renly Baratheon too. But that alone might not be enough to survive the cunning of the Lannisters. "Do you truly mean to go through with it?" Peter asked, stepping forward. There was no mocking drawl in his voice now, no hint of that playful cynicism that usually laced his every word. Confronting the Lannisters outright carries great risk. They will not yield the throne simply because you produce a paper. A piece of parchment, even one bearing the king's seal, is worthless if the swords that back it are lacking. Ned tightened his jaw, looking at the man with stern resolution. "I have kept silent long enough. The realm cannot be left in the hands of false kings." "Indeed," Peter said softly, "I do not doubt your convictions, my lord. But convictions without cunning can lead a man to his grave." In another timeline, Ned might have spurned such advice. He had never relished cunning, nor did he take easily to games of manipulation. Yet he realized that perhaps Lord Baelish was speaking truth. Robert's seal was a potent symbol if the City Watch and the lords of the realm recognized the signature, but Cersei Lannister had spies in every corridor of the Red Keep. She had the ear of her father, Tywin Lannister, who commanded one of the most formidable armies in Westeros. She would not go quietly. Ned dipped his head in acknowledgement. "I hear you. You have a plan." Peter's expression flickered with something new, respect. "If you can garner the support of the Gold Cloaks, the men will follow their Lord Commander, Janos Slynt. But Slynt has no real loyalties except to whomever pays him. The Lannisters have deep pockets. I can sway him if you wish, but you must trust me. Completely." There was a stillness to the air, as if the night itself held its breath waiting for Ned's answer. He felt the weight of his own uncertainty. This was Peter Baelish, Littlefinger, the man who had built an empire from coin, secrets, and 1,000 quiet favors. There were whispers that he thrived on chaos, that he grew from disorder like a weed in a neglected garden. Yet something in his eyes tonight seemed earnest. Ned thought of his daughters, Sansa and Arya, who were still within these walls. He considered his vow to protect them and to keep them from harm. "I will trust you," he said, the words heavy on his tongue. "But if you cross me, if any harm should come to my daughters—" "You needn't finish," Peter interrupted, raising a slender hand. "I understand. Ned allowed himself a small nod. Then we act tonight, he decided. We must move swiftly, before the Lannisters secure the throne. That set in motion an intense and secretive flurry of activity. Baelish departed with speed and silence, leaving Ned alone with the weight of what he had just chosen. Tomorrow, he would present Robert's written command to the small council, naming him regent of the 7 kingdoms until the rightful heir, Stannis Baratheon, arrived. He was not entirely certain Stannis was the best choice, but he was Robert's oldest living brother, and the law was clear in that regard. No matter how stern or joyless Stannis might be, he was the rightful heir under the laws of succession. Ned knew that his decision did not merely alter the realm's future. It would shape how history itself would remember him. Was he the honorable hand of the king who exposed treason, or a stubborn fool who found his end by challenging the might of the Lannisters? The truth, as often was the case, might lie in the outcome. He thought of Catelyn, longing for the comfort of her presence. But she was in the Riverlands with their son, Robb, dealing with familial matters involving her father's health. The gods alone knew when he might see her again. He steeled himself. If he held King's Landing for Stannis, the rest might fall into place. The realm would know the truth. Peace might be preserved, though at a grave cost. Late into the night, Ned did not sleep. He wrote letters, sealed them with wax, and entrusted them to Maester Pycelle for dispatch to Dragonstone, to Riverrun, and even one to Winterfell. He drafted instructions for the gold cloaks to bar the city gates against any potential Lannister reinforcements. Finally, when the candles had burned low, he allowed himself a moment of rest in a chair by the dying embers of his hearth, mind swimming with possibilities and fears. Above all else, he prayed that Petyr Baelish was sincere. For if he was not, Ned knew, no measure of honor could save him from the headsman's sword. As dawn broke, Ned roused himself, rubbing the stubble on his chin. He left instructions for his household guard to stay vigilant and for Sansa and Arya to remain in their chambers until he sent for them. He knew Sansa would protest. She was always keen to see the court, to delight in the pageantry of the palace, but Ned made it clear that she must do as he said or risk ruin. Arya, he suspected, would be more likely to keep her head down, if only because she could sense the tension in the air. He made his way to the throne room, accompanied by a small retinue of Stark men. The silence in the halls was unsettling. An uneasy hush had settled over the Red Keep, as if everyone sensed that this day would bring a monumental shift. The gold cloaks posted at the doors only gave him cursory nods, which he returned, heart-thumping with cautious hope. If Baelish's promises held weight, these men would stand by him when the moment came. Inside, the throne room's grandeur struck him as cold and foreboding. The Iron Throne loomed upon its raised dais, a twisted mass of melted swords that exuded sharp menace. The stained glass windows sent slender beams of early morning light across the floor. Gathered around were lords and ladies, whispering anxious. On the dais waited the queen, Cersei, clad in black mourning robes, though how genuine her grief for Robert might be was anyone's guess, and beside her stood Prince Joffrey with the haughty tilt of his chin. The boy seemed eager, as though longing for the moment he could declare himself king. To his side, the hound Sandor Clegane stood in stoic silence, face hidden behind a snarl of burned flesh. Ser Barristan Selmy was present too, old and resolute in his white cloak, his posture regal. Ned stepped forward with an outward confidence he did not fully possess. Renly Baratheon, younger brother of the king, was also in attendance, though Ned had heard rumors that Renly might be mustering troops or even preparing to flee the city. But there he was, arms folded across his chest, gaze fixed on Ned. Cersei's green eyes flickered like a cat's as she saw him approach. A smile curled her lips, but it held no warmth. "Lord Stark," she said, "we had not expected you so early." Ned bowed stiffly, as was polite, though his neck felt rigid. "It seems to me that the business of the realm can brook no delay." Joffrey sneered down at him. "You will kneel before your king." He cast a glance at the boy. "I will kneel before the rightful king." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Before Joffrey could retort with the petulance that twisted his features, Ned stepped close to the dais, though still at a respectful distance. "I come with the last commands of my friend and your father, King Robert Baratheon," he said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "As Hand of the King, I call for recognition of the rightful heir. Lord Stannis Baratheon, Robert's older brother, is next in line to the Iron Throne." He produced the parchment bearing Robert's seal, brandishing it to the crowd. Eyes widened. Whispers buzzed. Cersei's lips twitched in the slightest of warnings, but she did not speak yet. Joffrey looked furious, as if the mere mention of Stannis' name was an affront to his pride. Ned dared not give the queen or her brood time to recover. "This is King Robert's will," Ned continued, handing it to Ser Barristan. The Lord Commander of the King's Guard took it gingerly, scanning the words. He names me protector of the realm until Lord Stannis can assume the throne. I invite all to bear witness to the king's own words." Barristan's face hardened, though he masked his surprise well. "It bears his seal and signature," the old knight confirmed quietly. He handed it back to Ned. The hush became a roar of murmurs. Cersei raised a hand, her measured voice cutting through the noise. "King Robert is dead," she said. "My lords and ladies, we must think of the stability of the realm. Do we truly want to entrust the throne to an absent man who may harbor only vengeance in his heart? My son, Joffrey, Robert's own seed, stands ready to be crowned. He is here, he is present, and continuity brings peace." Ned's voice rang out firmer. "I have evidence," he said, "that Joffrey is not Robert's son." That admission caused an explosion of gasps. Several lords turned wide-eyed, some stepping back as if a scorpion had appeared among them. Renly Baratheon's eyes flickered with triumph at that revelation. Peter Baelish, who had slipped into the hall quietly, stood near the gold cloaks, watching intently. Cersei's face went pale, her composure faltered for but a heartbeat. She steadied herself quickly. "This is treason," she declared. "A vile rumor. The ravings of a man desperate to hold power." Ned shook his head. "I loved King Robert like a brother. I only speak the truth he deserved to know. Joffrey is your son by your brother Jaime, and I will swear it on every god that sees us. We all know the Baratheon lineage, black of hair, black of heart," Robert liked to jest. "How do we explain these children with golden locks in a line unbroken by any other coloring for generations?" The hall erupted again, and Cersei's expression turned lethal. "Seize him," she commanded, glancing at the gold cloaks. "This man slanders the crown." Her voice was cold, unwavering, but Ned's heart pounded. Here was the moment that would decide if Baelish had done as he promised. If not, Ned was a dead man. Across the hall, Janos Slynt, commander of the City Watch, hesitated, then he gave a curt nod, and some of the gold cloaks stepped forward. But instead of moving toward Ned Stark, they formed a line between the dais and the lord they had been ordered to arrest, blocking the approach of Lannister guards. A ringing hush followed, broken only by the sound of swords scraping in scabbards. Joffrey's mouth fell open. Cersei's face darkened with shock. Ned remained where he stood, a silent weight of relief crashing through him. Peter Baelish, from his vantage point, caught Ned's eye and gave the faintest of smiles, a tilt of his head that said, "We have them." Joffrey snapped out of his shock, slamming a fist on the arm of the throne. "I am the king," he shrieked, voice cracking. "Arrest him. Do as I command, or I'll have your heads." A hush. The gold cloaks did not budge. Instead, their sergeants barked orders that resounded through the hall. More men poured in. Queen Cersei's face twisted with fury. She turned to the Hound, but Sandor Clegane did not move, apparently as startled as everyone else by the City Watch's disobedience. Ser Barristan Selmy, for his part, stood torn. His duty, as the Lord Commander of the King's Guard, was to protect the true king. But who was the true king? Ned lifted a hand, seeking calm. "Ser Barristan," he said. "Stand aside, good night. The blood of the innocent need not be spilled in this hall." Barristan's knuckles tightened around the hilt of his sword, but there was something in his old, weary eyes that signaled understanding. Years of loyalty to Robert had overshadowed any illusions about the Lannisters. With a subtle sigh, he lowered his weapon. Joffrey's eyes darted around, wide with shock. "My mother, do something," he hissed. But Cersei, seeing that the City Watch had turned, flicked her gaze toward Ned, then Peter, and a flicker of panic touched her features. Lannister men at arms in the gallery above looked uncertain. They outnumbered the few Stark guards, but the gold cloaks were 4 times as many. A standoff loomed. In a moment that seemed suspended in time, Ned advanced 2 steps, the hush so thick that each footfall rang against the marble floor. He faced Joffrey, who was perched on the Iron Throne's edge. "Step down. There is no need for bloodshed if you yield peacefully." For a terrible instant, Ned thought the boy would command them to kill him anyway. Joffrey's face contorted. He was a child clinging to power. Cersei hissed something that was lost in the tension, but she pressed a hand to Joffrey's shoulder. "We must withdraw," she said quietly, though her words carried in the hush. "There is nothing to be won here. Not today." Joffrey sputtered, but the wave of gold cloaks stepping closer stilled his protests. He flung Ned a furious look as if memorizing every angle of his face for some future vengeance, then rose from the throne. "You will regret this," he spat. Ned remained silent, standing tall. The threat hung in the air. Cersei wrapped her arm around Joffrey, urging him off the dais. A cluster of Lannister guards came to flank them, while the gold cloaks parted to let them pass. But not without multiple pointed spears warning them not to try anything foolish. They retreated, and for the first time, Ned realized he had won a bloodless confrontation. He almost could not believe it. His heart hammered in his chest. The queen and her retinue swept out, their cloaks a swirl of red. Behind them, Renly Baratheon let out a breath he seemed to have been holding forever. "The lion retreats," he muttered. "Gods be good, Ned, I didn't think it possible." Ned looked to Peter, who approached with careful, measured steps, the ghost of a grin dancing on his lips. "City watches with you, Lord Stark. You've just seized the capital, albeit with minimal fuss." Ned gave a curt nod, acknowledging the debt. "You did as you said." "Indeed." Peter's voice was quiet, thoughtful. "That does not mean we're safe. Cersei will not allow this to stand. She'll be summoning allies as we speak." Ned inhaled, turning to face the courtiers who remained. Some were frightened, others relieved. "Henceforth," he announced, "the Iron Throne stands vacant until the rightful heir, Lord Stannis Baratheon, arrives to claim it. I, Eddard Stark, shall act as protector of the realm by Robert's will. All those who dispute the king's command do so at their peril." Renly stepped forward, a small smile quirking his lips as if he could hardly believe Ned's resolve. "We must plan quickly," he said. "If Cersei escapes the city to rally Tywin's forces, we may have civil war." "My men hold the gates," said Janos Slynt, stepping forward. His beady eyes flickered with greed or cunning, or perhaps both. "She will not pass without your leave, Lord Stark." Ned studied the man warily. He suspected Slynt's loyalty was purchased by Peter's gold, but for the moment that would have to suffice. "Hold the gates," Ned agreed, "and let no one through without my permission." A few lords and ladies trickled out of the throne room, no doubt eager to decide which side to swear fealty to. Ned stood with a heavy exhale, the enormity of his action settling upon him like a cloak of ice. But it was done. He had staved off immediate bloodshed, and the city, for now, was under his control. He nodded to Ser Barristan. "We will keep the peace for now. Gather the King Guard, if you would, and deliver to them the truth of the matter. I do not wish for more conflict." Barristan bowed stiffly, looking torn but resolved. "As you command, Lord Stark." With that, Ned strode from the throne room. Peter followed, matching his brisk pace. They stepped into a side corridor where half a dozen of Ned's guards awaited, forming a protective circle around their lord. The tension was still thick in the Red Keep, the halls quiet except for hurried footfalls of servants who seemed uncertain whether to run or kneel. Word would spread like wildfire. Eddard Stark had ousted Joffrey and the Queen. The question was whether the realm would accept it. Ned turned to Peter. "There will be reprisals." Peter tipped his head. "Without question. Tywin Lannister won't stand for this. You need to secure alliances, and swiftly. The Tyrells are half a kingdom away, yet a potent force if convinced to back you. The Dornish may still resent House Lannister for old grievances. And do not forget the Vale. Jon Arryn's death left them leaderless, but your wife's sister, Lady Lysa, might still hold sway there if she can be reasoned with." Ned thought of Lysa in the Eyrie with her young son. He doubted her reliability. "And what of the north? My son Robb is but 15. Winterfell stands far from here. If I summon him, it will take weeks for him to arrive with an army. Then your hold on King's Landing must be unshakable until that time," Peter said. "If the city remains under your control, your position remains strong." They walked in silence for a moment, approaching the Tower of the Hand. Ned paused at the threshold. "I must tend to my daughters and let them know they are safe. Come to me at midday, Peter. We have much to plan." Peter bowed. "At your service, my lord." He lingered for a beat, as if considering whether to say more. Finally, he smiled. An expression that, for once, lacked a sneer. "I won't deny. There's a certain thrill in all this." Ned's brow furrowed. "It is no game, Lord Baelish." Peter's smile faded. "No," he agreed quietly, "though many will treat it as such." With that, he turned and left, the hush of the corridor swallowing his footsteps. Ned ascended the stairs to the chambers where Sansa and Arya waited. He found them as instructed, Sansa with eyes reddened from tears, Arya pacing like a caged animal. The moment he entered, relief broke across their faces. He embraced them both, holding tight. "Father, is it true?" Sansa demanded. "Is the king dead?" Ned nodded somberly. "Robert Baratheon is gone." Sansa's lip trembled. "But Joffrey..." He stopped her gently. "Joffrey is not who we thought he was. The Lannisters, they've deceived us, sweet girl. The City Watch stands with us, for now, but I fear that war could come of this. You both must be vigilant. Stay away from Lannisters, keep near our guards, and do not wander the castle alone." Arya lifted her chin. "I have Needle. I can fight if I must." Ned managed a thin smile. "You should not have to, but I want you both prepared. We do not know how events will unfold. Sansa looked on the verge of tears again. I only wanted to be his queen. This was my dream. Now, everything is so dark and frightening. Ned pulled her close. Dreams can mislead, dear one. We must do what we must. And it falls to us to hold fast to who we are, Starks of Winterfell, and to keep our honor when all else might fail. He sat with them a while longer, explaining gently what had happened, though omitting the grimmest details. By the time he left, both girls were calmer, though fear lingered in their eyes. Ned carried the same dread in his heart, a sense that the respite would be fleeting. By midday, the Tower of the Hand was bustling with activity. Lords Renly Baratheon, Peter Baelish, and several other influential figures had assembled at Ned's request. The open windows admitted a warm breeze, but the tension in the room was thick as tar. Renly was the first to speak. I have men loyal to me in the city, as well as throughout the Stormlands. Should my brother Stannis appear, he'll have to navigate these alliances. I love him, but he is not known for forging friendships or inspiring devotion. Still, if Robert's will is clear, I will abide by it. Ned dipped his head. I thank you. Our aim is to preserve peace and to fulfill the rightful law of succession. If Stannis is accepted, we avoid a war, assuming Tywin Lannister does not mount a rebellion. We must be prepared for that. He'll gather his bannermen for certain, Peter said. And the Queen will not remain idle. She'll be sending ravens. She'll attempt to bribe, threaten, and conjure alliances. Without the throne, her children's futures, and her own, are at stake. Ned rapped his knuckles on the table. Then we must secure the city, strengthen our watch at the gates, the harbor, and the walls. Renly, see to it that your men stand with the gold cloaks if the Queen tries to retake the Red Keep by force. Lord Baelish, I charge you to ensure coin flows into the city watch's coffers. We cannot allow them to be bought by the Lannisters. Peter inclined his head. Consider it done, my lord. Ned's gaze flicked to the others in the room. Varys, the master of whisperers, stood by a window, his hands folded. He looked on with an eerie calm, as if he had foreseen all of this. Ser Barristan Selmy was also present, silent and austere. Finally, Grand Maester Pycelle, stooped and trembling, hovered near the door, a look of consternation etched on his wrinkled face. We will need to contact Lord Stannis at Dragonstone immediately, Ned said. He must come with haste. He is no fool, Varys said in his soft, unctuous voice. I suspect he may already be gathering ships for a possible confrontation. So be it. We must not allow Cersei the chance to slip away and rally Tywin. I will see if we can parley with her. Perhaps she will accept terms. Renly gave Ned a dubious look. You think so highly of her? Hardly, Ned answered. But I must give her the chance to avoid bloodshed for the realm's sake. If she refuses, we will meet force with force. The gathering concluded with each man assigned tasks. Peter vanished to manage the city's funds, Renly departed to arrange more men for the defenses, and the others scattered to do their own bidding. Ned found a small reprieve that afternoon to break his fast with Arya and Sansa, ensuring they were guarded by men loyal to House Stark. He wrote another flurry of letters, summoning the support of lords in the Riverlands, the Vale, and the North. Every step felt like crossing a frozen lake, uncertain which stride might crack the ice beneath him. Yet each hour that passed without open violence was a gift he had not expected. By dusk, the response came. Cersei Lannister, who had barricaded herself and her children in Maegor's Holdfast, sent word that she would meet Ned under a banner of truce in the courtyard to discuss terms. The messenger, a trembling steward with Lannister colors, handed Ned the Queen's seal. He read her message carefully. The Queen proposed a meeting with minimal retinues at twilight to settle the matter of the throne. Peter shrugged when Ned shared it with him. She seeks to test your readiness, perhaps, or to see if you truly have the strength you claim. Be careful, Lord Stark. I will be, Ned said. I would prefer to settle this without bloodshed. Thus, as the sun set over King's Landing, the courtyard within the Red Keep's walls was bathed in orange light. Ned arrived with a dozen gold cloaks, plus Ser Barristan and Peter at his side. Renly, too, though his presence was subdued. Opposite them stood Cersei in deep mourning garb, her golden hair loose. Behind her stood the Hound, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen, as well as a score of Lannister guards. The uneasy hush suggested that a single harsh word could spark violence. Ned inclined his head. Your Grace, he said, I am glad you agreed to meet. Perhaps we can end this strife before it becomes war. Cersei's green eyes flashed with contained fury. So long as you spout nonsense about my children's parentage, how can I consider peace? You threaten the legitimacy of my son. You name Stannis in Joffrey's place. Ned took a breath. He was a direct man, and lying did not come easily to him. I do not do it lightly. The truth is as I stated. Robert's will is clear. Joffrey glowered, his hand near the hilt of a jeweled dagger. Tommen, younger and softer, clung to his mother's sleeve, while Myrcella, near womanhood, watched with round eyes full of dread. Ned almost pitied them. They were pawns in a game they had not devised. Cersei's chin rose. My father's armies could tear the city apart. If you think to keep us imprisoned here, you risk countless lives. Ned's gaze did not falter. If your father cares more for the seat of the king than for the lives of the people, that is on his conscience. I have no desire to see war come to the city. Accept the rightful succession, and no harm will come to you or your children. Joffrey spat on the ground, a childish gesture of defiance. Cersei pulled him back, but her composure was fraying. You think me naive? Stannis will not rest until my children are declared abominations and cast out, or worse. He is not a merciful man. Perhaps not, Ned conceded, but the law is on his side. I will not defy the laws of our land. Cersei's eyes narrowed. Such a sturdy pillar of honor you are, Lord Stark. She turned to Peter. And you, Littlefinger, did I not once say you were the friend of Lannisters? Peter smirked, offering a polite bow. I am the friend of opportunity, my lady. Her lips curled in disgust. A poor friend indeed. Tension crackled, and Ned wondered if a fight might break out right here. But then Cersei's shoulders relaxed, if only fractionally. She cast a glance at her children, and for the first time, some flicker of maternal instinct shone behind her cold eyes. We cannot remain in this city as prisoners. Let me take my children away. We shall go to Casterly Rock, and the throne can be Stannis's if he can hold it. Ned exhaled, relief mingling with surprise. He had expected more defiance. I will grant safe passage, he said. But you must vow to keep the peace. No armies, no vengeance. Cersei lifted her chin in regal challenge. I vow nothing. My father will do as he pleases, no matter what words pass my lips. But I can promise not to raise arms against you so long as we are unmolested on our journey. Ned realized it might be the best he could hope for. If Tywin was set on war, it was likely unstoppable, yet if Cersei and the royal children were out of the city, perhaps that would lessen the chance of a bloody siege in King's Landing. So be it, he said at last. Tomorrow at dawn, you may depart with an escort. If you break your word, the realm will hold you accountable. Her green eyes flashed. Oh, I am certain. She beckoned her children. We will leave at dawn. Under your watchful eye. They departed, an uneasy tension trailing in their wake. Ned glanced at Peter, who shrugged, a wry smile curling his lips. One step closer to preventing a massacre in the streets. Congratulations, my lord. Renly gazed after the Lannisters' retreat. I pray we've not just sowed the seeds of a far worse war. Ned pressed a hand over his heart, ignoring the cold fear that churned there. We shall see. At dawn, Ned oversaw the departure of the Lannisters. 100 gold cloaks lined the courtyard, parted in 2 columns to create a clear path to the gates. Cersei, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen appeared in a procession of horses and wagons, accompanied by Lannister men-at-arms. The queen's face remained stony, yet the children seemed relieved, uncertain, and fearful all at once. Joffrey, eyes flicking about for some sign of betrayal, clutched the reins of his horse with knuckles white. Peter stood near Ned, half-lidded gaze scanning the scene. She could flee to her father, he murmured. The second she's out of the city, she's free to do as she pleases. Ned gave a terse nod. Let her. We have saved the city from an immediate battle. I have made it clear I will not harm her or her children so long as they do not conspire against the realm. Their words hovered in the morning light. Cersei passed Ned, meeting his gaze one last time. There was no warmth in her eyes, only the lingering promise of retribution. But she rode on, out of the Red Keep's gate, and Joffrey followed, scowling at Ned as though memorizing his face. Tommen and Myrcella looked back, confusion in their features. The city watch did not interfere, they merely observed. By the time the Lannister host had vanished around a corner of the city's winding streets, Peter let out a small sigh of relief. You've done it, he said, with an odd note of wonder. Joffrey's would-be reign is ended, and with a minimal body count. He chuckled darkly. You've changed the game, Lord Stark. Ned looked at the receding column, a weight in his chest. A short-term victory. But the game is not over yet. He turned away, back toward the Red Keep, to face the day's challenges. Stannis Baratheon must be summoned. The lords of the realm must be convinced. War might still loom, but for the moment King's Landing belonged to Eddard Stark, the protector of the realm. Word spread like wildfire through the city. The small folk gossiped in the alleyways and markets that the wolf had chased off the lion's cubs. Some whispered that Ned Stark was too honorable, that he would fall soon enough to Lannister treachery. Others cheered that Joffrey, rumored to be a cruel child, was banished before he could wreak havoc on the city. Meanwhile, higher-born courtiers weighed alliances carefully, uncertain whether to remain in King's Landing or slip away and seek favor from Tywin Lannister. Ned remained in the Red Keep, sending out letters every day urging Stannis to come swiftly, calling on his loyal bannermen, and seeking to hold the city together with the slender threads of unity he could muster. Maester Pycelle, in the days that followed, grew fretful in council meetings. "My lord," he would say, voice trembling, "surely, in the interest of peace, we might have crowned Renly or settled with the Queen Regent. A realm at war is a dreadful thing." Renly, present at the council, would bristle. "Do you think I would take the throne from my own brother? Stannis is the rightful heir. I may not approve of his ways, but I will not steal his birthright." Peter would tilt his head, eyes gleaming. "And so Stannis it is. But if the Lannisters, or half the realm, refuse to bend the knee to him, we could have civil war. We must gather our strengths and prepare for the worst while praying for the best." Ned would moderate these discussions, firm in his convictions. "The law is clear, and we have Robert's will. If the Lannisters choose war, we will respond. But I will not start it. Let it be known throughout the 7 kingdoms that we stand for rightful succession. No more, no less." Still, his nights were restless. He met with Sansa and Arya, assuring them that soon, if the city remained stable, he would send them back to Winterfell, where they would be safe. Each evening, he paced his solar, gazing out at the rooftops of King's Landing. He saw flickering lanterns and the swirling haze of cooking fires. He knew tensions still thrummed below. Tensions in Flea Bottom could erupt with a single spark. He prayed it would not come to that. One afternoon, a raven arrived, bearing word from Dragonstone. Stannis Baratheon had received Ned's letters, and in a curt reply, he acknowledged his claim to the throne and would set sail with a fleet to King's Landing to take his seat upon the Iron Throne. The letter was formal, almost cold. Typical of Stannis. But it was enough to confirm that Ned's caretaker regency was recognized by the man for whom he was holding the crown. "He'll come with ships, no doubt," Peter said, scanning the missive. "I wonder if he'll arrive with an army or just enough men to secure the city." Ned set the letter aside. "We will welcome him with open gates, provided he does not plan to burn the city in his righteous fury." Peter quirked an eyebrow. "He's not the burning sort. More the grinding. Stannis wins his wars by persistence and discipline, not wild conflagrations." Ned exhaled, feeling an old weariness. "Good. Then we can avoid unnecessary bloodshed." Yet, as if to mock his hopes, another raven arrived that same day, this one from Casterly Rock. Tywin Lannister demanded that Ned relinquish King's Landing at once, release the Queen and her children from any vow that might bind them, and restore Joffrey to the throne, or face the wrath of House Lannister. The letter dripped with veiled threats, promising the annihilation of House Stark if Ned did not comply. Renly scoffed at the council table when Ned read it aloud. "We expected no less. Tywin believes half the realm is his to command by virtue of gold alone." Ned folded the parchment. "I will not cower to threats. We stand by the rightful heir, Stannis." Barristan Selmy, who had since declared his loyalty to the lawful king, gave a solemn nod. "It may be that we see Lannister banners beneath the walls of King's Landing soon. That, or Tywin might march on the Riverlands or threaten the north. His host can be swift and brutal. You must be prepared." Ned's gut twisted, recalling that his own father and brother had died in this very city. The specter of war was no stranger to House Stark, and he feared how easily battles could engulf the 7 kingdoms. But he refused to yield. If he bent now, what good was all the toil, the risk, the exposure of truth? "Let him come," Ned said. "We will hold the city for Stannis and pray the lords of the realm see reason." Days stretched into weeks, and the city slowly adjusted to a new normal. Ned Stark's regency was enforced by the Gold Cloaks, while Renly's men patrolled the walls and the harbor. Letters trickled in from other lords across Westeros, some pledging fealty to the rightful heir, others expressing caution, and still others ignoring the summons altogether. From Winterfell, young Robb Stark wrote that he would muster the North if called upon, but it would take time. Catelyn remained in the Riverlands, seeking Tully support for Ned's cause. To complicate matters, news arrived from beyond the narrow sea. Daenerys Targaryen, rumored to have wedded a great Khal of the Dothraki, had lost her husband but gained some measure of power. Whispers of dragons hatching had begun to circulate. Ned did not know if these were mere rumors. He had enough immediate troubles without chasing tales of dragons returning to the world. One crisp morning, word arrived that the royal fleet of Dragonstone had been sighted off Massey's Hook. Stannis Baratheon would reach the city by day's end. Ned wasted no time instructing the city watch to open the gates to Stannis's forces, ensuring no confusion triggered bloodshed. He wanted to avoid any clash between the Gold Cloaks and the forces of Dragonstone, which might assume King's Landing was hostile if the Lannisters had somehow twisted the narrative. As the day wore on, Ned stood upon the walls overlooking Blackwater Bay. The sun gleamed on the water, revealing distant shapes, great war galleys, sails snapping in the wind. Renly joined him, silent as they watched the approach. "You do realize," Renly said eventually, "once Stannis takes the throne, things will change. He's not one for compromise or kindness." Ned nodded. "He is just in his own way, though. The realm needs stability. Better a stern king than a false one who would tear the realm apart." Renly's lips quirked wryly. "We shall see." Before dusk, the gates were opened. Ned led a small retinue to greet Stannis at the main courtyard inside the city gate. There, amidst a gathering crowd, the Lord of Dragonstone rode in, clad in black armor emblazoned with the flaming heart and crowned stag sigil, newly adopted to signify his claim. His face was hard lines and ridges, lacking any warmth. At his side rode a woman with red hair, wearing robes of a strange design, the foreign red priestess he had heard whispered about, Melisandre. Behind them came columns of disciplined troops bearing Dragonstone's banner. Their polished steel glittered in the waning sunlight. Ned stepped forward, dropping to one knee. "Your Grace, the city is yours." A murmur went through the assembled people as he publicly acknowledged Stannis as king. Stannis remained astride his horse, gaze sweeping the courtyard. "Rise, Lord Eddard," he said, voice low and grave. "You have served the realm faithfully in holding the city for me." Ned stood, meeting Stannis's cold blue eyes. "I swore to do as King Roberts will demanded." Stannis's glance flicked to Renly, whose expression was neither warm nor combative, merely watchful. Then to Peter Baelish, who wore a slight smile of courtesy. The red-haired woman at Stannis's side regarded Ned with an inscrutable gaze, as though peering into his soul. Finally, Stannis dismounted, handing his reins to a waiting squire. He surveyed the city watch, noticing their alignment, how they parted for him. "The usurpers are driven out?" Stannis asked simply. Ned steeled himself. "Queen Cersei and her children left the city. They ride to Casterly Rock, most likely. We have no illusions that Tywin Lannister will accept." "Your coronation quietly." Stannis's mouth set in a grim line. "Then they will be dealt with. War must be waged. The Iron Throne is mine by right, and no Lannister shall scare me from claiming it." Ned respected the iron determination in Stannis's voice, even if it lacked Robert's boisterous warmth. He bowed his head slightly. "All here will do our duty to the realm. The council stands ready to serve your grace." "Good," Stannis said. He turned back to the red priestess, who merely nodded, offering a faint smile. Then, stepping forward, he signaled his men. "Secure the Red Keep. I will ascend the throne at once." And so it was that Ned led Stannis Baratheon through the halls of the Red Keep, passing corridors that had once echoed with the easy laughter of King Robert and more recently the sullen fear of the Lannisters. The swirl of boots and banners followed behind them. Courtiers emerged, bowing hastily to the new king. Some eyed him with relief, others with trepidation. The entire castle buzzed with anxious energy. In the throne room, the lines of gold cloaks parted. Stannis walked to the foot of the Iron Throne, paused, and gazed at it with solemn intensity. That monstrous seat of steel had seen so much blood and strife, from Aegon the Conqueror's forging of it to the madness of the Targaryen kings to Robert's rebellion. Now it would bear Stannis Baratheon. He ascended the steps, each boot ringing like a forge hammer on metal. At last, he stood before the throne, turned, and seated himself. No wild cheers erupted, only a hush that spoke volumes. The watchers did not know if they should rejoice or quake at this king's severity. Then he spoke, voice echoing across the hall. I, Stannis of the House Baratheon, first of my name, do claim the Iron Throne by right of blood and the laws of the Seven Kingdoms. I name Ser Davos Seaworth my Lord Admiral. I name Eddard Stark as my hand of the king if he will accept it. He looked directly at Ned then, waiting. Ned felt the breath catch in his throat. He had served Robert out of love and loyalty, but Stannis was a man who did not win hearts easily. Still, Ned had come this far, risked everything for the rightful heir. Honor demanded he continue. He went to one knee once more. I am yours to command, your grace. Stannis nodded, unsmiling. Then rise, Lord Eddard, hand of the king. A ripple of subdued applause spread through the courtiers. Peter bowed, though Ned did not miss the momentary flicker of annoyance in the man's eyes, perhaps at not gaining a higher post or reward. Renly offered a polite dip of his head, though he said nothing. The Red Priestess lingered behind the throne, her expression serene as though she had expected all of this to unfold exactly as it had. 1,000 concerns beset Ned's mind as he stood. He worried about Tywin Lannister's next move, about the safety of his daughters, about the loyalties of the realm. But at least, for this moment, the crown sat upon the rightful head. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could avoid the carnage that would have exploded had Joffrey remained. Within a day, ravens were dispatched across the Seven Kingdoms, announcing Stannis' coronation and calling on all lords to bend the knee. Ned spent hours with the new king in council, discussing strategies for quelling Lannister opposition. Stannis wanted to march at once on Harrenhal, where some said Tywin Lannister was gathering forces, but Ned advised caution. They needed to secure alliances with the Reach or at least ensure the Tyrells stayed neutral. They needed the North and the Vale in place. Tywin was cunning, and if they marched too soon, they might be outflanked. You were always prudent, Lord Stark, Stannis said, a slight edge to his tone. But I do not intend to let Tywin fortify himself. The longer we wait, the stronger he grows. True, Ned conceded. Yet, if we move too quickly, we risk dividing our own support. I propose we negotiate with House Tyrell for their assistance. If we have the strength of the Reach behind us, Tywin will think twice about open conflict. Stannis drummed his fingers on the table. Very well. I grant you leeway in these negotiations. But do not tarry. Over the following weeks, Ned and Peter Baelish worked together, sending envoys to Highgarden. Peter used his connections, a labyrinth of informants and bribes, to court the Tyrells. Meanwhile, Renly dispatched friendly letters to his old compatriots in the Reach, reminding them of his presence at court. Ned oversaw the city's defenses, ensuring that if Tywin marched, King's Landing would not be taken by surprise. As these diplomatic efforts advanced, Ned also found time to see Sansa and Arya. The tension in the Red Keep had not disappeared, but Stannis' men were disciplined and less prone to harassing the Stark girls than Joffrey's would have been. Arya still yearned to train with Syrio Farrell, her dancing master, though Syrio had proven elusive in the chaos. Sansa had taken to reading and embroidery once more, though with far less enthusiasm than before, her illusions about court life shattered. Ned saw in her eyes a new wariness, a fragile sorrow that had replaced youthful fantasies. One day, as Ned walked the courtyard, Peter Baelish sidled up, hands clasped behind his back. "My Lord Hand," he said smoothly, "you must be pleased with your success." Ned's gaze slid over him. "I am relieved the city did not become a slaughterhouse. But I would not call what we have success yet." Peter's mouth quirked. "You see how the wheels turn, though, yes? If I had not stayed loyal that day in the throne room, you might have lost your head. Now here you are, hand to the new king." Ned knew a subtle request for gratitude when he heard it. "I have not forgotten. You've earned the realm's thanks. Such thanks rarely come in the form of gold," Peter mused. "However, I will settle for continuing in my post as Master of Coin, if King Stannis will have me." Ned hesitated. "I will speak to him about it." Peter inclined his head. "Excellent. One more piece of counsel for old time's sake. Watch the Red Woman. Melisandre, they call her. She whispers in Stannis' ear. I've heard the men from Dragonstone muttering about a foreign god of fire and shadow. She might have more influence than we know." Ned frowned. He had noted her presence but tried to keep his distance from her. She was no more than an advisor. Stannis made decisions himself. or so Ned believed. "I will keep that in mind," he said. Peter smiled thinly. "The realm is a garden of weeds. Tend it well, my lord." And so matters continued, delicate as a spider's web. Ned navigated the politics of King's Landing, ensuring the City Watch remained loyal, forging new alliances, and awaiting the next Lannister move. News came that Tywin was indeed mustering armies near Harrenhal, forging alliances with some riverlords loyal to the Tullis only in name. Rumors surfaced that Jaime Lannister was gathering cavalry in the Westerlands, possibly to strike at Riverrun or even the Neck. Then, an unexpected development. A raven from Highgarden announced that Mace Tyrell would dispatch envoys to treat with King Stannis. Intrigued by the promise of a legitimate Baratheon reign and rumored alliance proposals, this was a boon. The Tyrells commanded a vast host. If they sided with Stannis, the Lannisters would be surrounded by enemies. That night, Ned allowed himself a small moment of hope. Perhaps they truly could avoid a wide-scale war. But the next morning arrived with ill news to counter the good. A breathless messenger came galloping through the city gates, carrying a battered letter from the Riverlands. It bore Catelyn's seal, and Ned read it with a heart pounding in his chest. She wrote of skirmishes near the Twins, raids by Lannister riders, and her fears for Robb's safety as the boy tried to hold the northern border. She also mentioned that Walder Frey, the Lord of the Twins, was stalling alliances, refusing passage unless certain demands were met. The seeds of conflict were everywhere. Ned rubbed his eyes, exhaustion pressing down. If he had truly averted the doom that had befallen him in that other path, where Littlefinger betrayed him, he had only done so to walk a knife's edge of precarious alliances and mounting threats. Still, he reminded himself he was alive. His daughters were alive. And somewhere, Catelyn worked to bring the Riverlords in line. It had to be better than the alternative. Stannis called a war council that evening. By torchlight in the Great Hall, the new king outlined his strategy with all the grim practicality that defined him. "We will not sit idle, waiting for the Lannisters to pick us apart. If the Tyrells join us, we march west. The city we leave under the watch of Lord Stark and a strong garrison. House Tyrell can approach from the south, forging a vice around Tywin's forces. House Tully, if Lady Catelyn secures their loyalty, can strike from the Riverlands. And if the North mobilizes under young Robb Stark, the Lannisters will be trapped between hammer and anvil." Many nodded agreement. Ned, though, was cautious. "We must confirm the Tyrell alliance first, Your Grace. And we must ensure the city remains secure. If we all ride forth and the Lannisters somehow circumvent us, King's Landing will be vulnerable." Stannis gave a curt nod. "Very well. I will host the Tyrell envoys personally. If they agree, we muster an army at once." Thus, in the days that followed, Highgarden's ambassadors arrived, feasted, and negotiated. Ned sat through long councils, hearing them out, ensuring that Stannis offered them incentives, positions at court, trade privileges. The Tyrells wanted a marriage alliance, that much was clear. They floated the idea of the king marrying Margaery Tyrell. Stannis, who had lost his wife recently, so the rumors said, considered it, though the presence of Melisandre seemed to cast a shadow on such arrangements. Still, the negotiations pressed on. All the while, Ned continued to see to the city's well-being. He ordered more grain into the city, anticipating that if war broke out, supplies might be cut. He had the gold cloaks patrol regularly to keep order. He listened to the pleas of small folk who had come to loathe the Lannisters for their arrogance but had yet to find much warmth in Stannis' rule. Such tasks weighed heavily, but he carried them out with the same honor he'd brought to Winterfell's governance. Through it all, Peter Baelish hovered, facilitating deals, exchanging coins for secrets, ensuring the realm's coffers kept the City Watch loyal. At last, word came that the Tyrells consented to ally with Stannis if a marriage to Margaery was arranged. The king agreed, though he evinced no great excitement at the match. A betrothal ceremony was hastily arranged in the Great September of Baelor, a modest affair by royal standards overshadowed by the looming threat of war. Nevertheless, the symbolic union was sealed, tying House Tyrell and House Baratheon together. Mace Tyrell dispatched riders at once, summoning the great Tyrell host. The realm braced for a confrontation that would decide its future. Ned stood beside Stannis in the throne room as the newly betrothed queen-to-be was presented. Margaery Tyrell, graceful and poised, curtsied deeply. She had the same auburn-brown hair and soft beauty as her brother Loras. Stannis, tall and gaunt, accepted her homage with a curt nod. Then, turning to Ned, he spoke in a voice that echoed. "The time is ripe. With the Tyrell banner men joining ours, we march west before the Lannisters can make their move. Lord Hand, I would have you remain in King's Landing to oversee governance and protect my seat until I return victorious. Your men shall remain. You may call upon the gold cloaks as needed." Ned bowed. "I will do as you command, your grace. And I pray for your swift victory." Stannis' lips pressed together. He beckoned Davos Seaworth, the newly raised Lord of the Rainwood, and Ser Loras Tyrell, who had arrived with the ambassadors, to his side. They conferred in low voices. Melisandre hovered like a crimson shadow, a faint smile on her lips, as if she saw a future victory in the flames. In the days that followed, the city was alive with the bustle of mustering. Banners flew from the ramparts, black stags and golden roses alike. Smiths labored day and night, forging arms for the swelling ranks of soldiers. Streets thronged with wagons, horses, sellswords seeking employment. The Great September offered prayers for a bloodless victory, though few believed it would come without a price in blood. Ned oversaw the departure from the city walls. Stannis rode at the head of a column of knights and foot soldiers, the Tyrell banners woven in among his own. Renly rode with them, though he still had not fully reconciled with his older brother. Peter Baelish, for now, remained behind, though Ned suspected he would find a way to profit from the war in any case. Sansa and Arya watched from a high window as the army poured out, rank after rank, heading westward down the King's Road. Ned felt a pang of worry in his chest. War was a gamble, and though their forces were strong, Tywin Lannister was no fool. Time pressed onward, each day a new swirl of rumors. Skirmishes in the Riverlands. Small victories by Tully outriders. The North mustering behind Robb Stark. Lannister foraging parties harried near Harrenhal. Edmure Tully was said to be leading a force from Riverrun to cut off the Lannister supply lines. And overshadowing all, the possibility that Tywin could land a devastating blow if they were unprepared. Ravens flew in and out of the Red Keep with a frantic regularity. Ned spent his nights poring over reports in the council chamber, conferring with Peter, Varys, Ser Barristan, and others. Whenever dread seized him, he reminded himself that he lived, that the city was not a charnel house. Arya was free to roam the courtyard with her wooden practice sword. Sansa was not betrothed to a sadistic boy king, forced to posture at a court that despised her. They were safe, at least for now. The first major news came from the field. A Lannister army under Jaime Lannister had attempted to flank the Tyrell Baratheon host near the Blackwater Rush, but they were intercepted by a combined force under Ser Loras Tyrell and Davos Seaworth. The ensuing battle was fierce, but Jaime's cavalry was forced to withdraw after heavy losses. Jaime himself had escaped, but the victory belonged to Stannis' side. The realm buzzed with the tidings. Celebrations broke out in the streets. Though Stannis was not beloved, the people cheered any victory that might end the war swiftly. But war never ends swiftly. Within days, another raven arrived, telling of Tywin Lannister's approach from the west with a formidable army. Harrenhal had been abandoned to him by some lords who feared his wrath. Now he was poised to strike at Riverrun or turn south to meet Stannis in open battle. The tension soared. Ned prayed for Catelyn and Robb, who were in the path of these armies. The new king's forces advanced further west, determined to bring Tywin to heel before he reached the Tully Heartlands. In King's Landing, the days dragged on with a mixture of dread and hope. Ned continued to rule his hand, ensuring that the people did not riot in the face of uncertain supply lines. Peter advised him on finances, and though Ned disliked the man's sly manner, he could not deny his skill at balancing the realm's books. Varys offered cryptic hints of Tywin's movements, gleaned from his network of whisperers. Ser Barristan oversaw the training of new recruits for the City Watch, hoping to avoid infiltration or sabotage. Sansa often joined Ned in the evenings now, quietly reading in a corner while he labored over parchments. He welcomed her presence, a reminder of home. Arya would sometimes burst in, breathless from practice in the yard, spouting excitement about how she'd nearly bested a squire. These small moments of normalcy kept Ned grounded. At last, a decisive missive arrived. The Battle of the Gold Road had been fought near the old route that led from Casterly Rock to King's Landing. Tywin's and Stannis' armies had clashed in a brutal engagement lasting from dawn to dusk. The letter, written by Ser Davos, bearing Stannis' seal, spoke of fierce fighting, with Lannister heavy cavalry charging again and again, only to be repelled by the combined discipline of Baratheon and Tyrell infantry. Ser Loras Tyrell had engaged Jaime in single combat briefly, but the Kingslayers slipped away amid the chaos. Stannis himself had rallied his troops to hold formation ever grim and unyielding. By dusk, Tywin's lines broke, and the Lion's banner withdrew. The letter claimed a great victory, though Tywin managed to retreat in an orderly fashion, preserving much of his force. It was not the utter rout Ned had hoped for, but it was a strong blow against House Lannister. Horns of celebration rang through King's Landing once more. People poured into the streets, exulting that the mightiest foe they feared had been driven back. Ned nodded to Ser Barristan as they read the letter together. "Perhaps we will see peace sooner than we thought." Barristan's eyes were thoughtful. "Tywin is not the kind to surrender easily, my lord. He may seek another battlefield, or fortify himself behind castle walls." Ned allowed himself a small smile. But even Tywin cannot fight a realm united against him. With the Tyrells, the Baratheons, the Tullus, and the North arrayed against him, it is only a matter of time. Barristan pressed a hand to the pommel of his sword. "Then let us pray that time is short and the bloodshed ends soon." Ned returned to his solar to find Sansa and Arya waiting, eyes alight with anticipation for news. He recounted what he knew: another victory. They asked about their mother and brother. He assured them that Catelyn and Robb were safe in the Riverlands, heartened by the news. The girls breathed sighs of relief. Arya brandished her practice sword, exclaiming that soon she would be a real knight and ride off to help. Ned shook his head, telling her to be patient, though he admired her spirit. Days flowed into nights, and the war in the west continued. Each raven brought updates, minor skirmishes, strategic maneuvers, castles changing hands. But House Lannister was on the defensive, pressed by King Stannis' methodical approach. The Tyrell host threatened to cut off supply lines from the south. The Tullus harried the Lannisters from the east. The North advanced under Robb Stark, who had mustered lords from Winterfell to the last hearth. Tywin faced an alliance so vast it seemed unstoppable. At last, a final blow arrived. Riverrun's Maester wrote that after a series of engagements near the Blue Fork, Tywin's army had collapsed. The Lannister lord had withdrawn to the stronghold of Casterly Rock itself. Stannis and his allies besieged the ancient seat of House Lannister, determined to break their final bastion. The cost was high, thousands dead on both sides, but the noose was tightening around Tywin's neck. He was cornered, outnumbered, and battered. The question became whether he would fight to the last or broker terms. Within a fortnight, the realm had its answer. Another raven from Ser Davos arrived. Tywin Lannister had at last agreed to treat for peace. The siege was fierce, the Lannister stores running low. Surrounded by the combined might of half the kingdoms, Tywin had no choice but to parley. King Stannis would ride into Casterly Rock under a banner of truce to finalize the terms. If Tywin attempted treachery, the rock would be taken by force, but if he genuinely sought peace, the bloodshed might finally end. Ned read the letter aloud to the small council. Peter Baelish nearly purred with satisfaction. "So it ends," he said, "unless Tywin seeks to lose everything." Varys steepled his fingers. A cunning lion might still have one last trick, but the odds are not in his favor. Ned's heart felt light for the first time in months. At last, the realm may know peace. Yet a small part of him remained vigilant. Tywin Lannister was not a man to be trifled with. But if indeed he surrendered, it would cement Stannis' rule and avert the ruin that threatened to engulf Westeros. A final stretch of tense waiting ensued. Ned continued to govern King's Landing, calming restive soldiers and ensuring the city had ample supplies. The mood in the capital improved markedly. Vendors sold Baratheon tokens, small stags carved of wood or shaped in tin. Gossip spread that once Tywin bent the knee, Stannis would host a grand feast in King's Landing, a celebration of victory. Throughout it all, Sansa and Arya stayed close to Ned, relieved that the nightmares seemed to be drawing to an end. Then, one bright morning, horns sounded at the gates. A long procession approached, flying the crowned stag banner. The watchers on the walls cheered, for at its head rode King Stannis Baratheon, flanked by Renly, Ser Davos, Ser Loras Tyrell, and numerous others. The line of knights and men-at-arms snaked through the streets, greeted by throngs of cheering smallfolk. Behind the king's retinue came wagons, presumably laden with spoils of war, and even a few Lannister prisoners marched in chains, heads hung low. Ned, arrayed in formal robes, descended to the courtyard with his retinue to welcome the king's triumphant return. He saw a new hardness in Stannis' face, deeper lines etched by the burdens of war. Melisandre rode behind him, her red gown flowing. But Stannis sat tall in the saddle, victory in his bearing. As he dismounted, Ned moved forward, bowing. "Your Grace." Stannis grasped Ned's arm. "It is done. Tywin Lannister has bent the knee. He surrendered Casterly Rock and pledged fealty, handing over substantial reparations. He will remain Lord of the Rock, but under tight constraints. His grandson, Tommen, is sent as a royal ward to Storm's End to ensure good behavior. The war is over." Cheers erupted around them. Ned felt a surge of profound relief. Thank the gods. Stannis nodded curtly. You held the city well. We owe you much. Renly, stepping closer, offered Ned a genuine smile for the first time in a long while. Yes, brother, do not understate our debt. If Ned had fallen that day, if he had not prevented the Lannisters from usurping the throne, we would be under Joffrey's boot, living in madness. Stannis looked away as if the mention of Joffrey reminded him of the incestuous scandal that had started all this. That boy will never wear a crown, he muttered. He is exiled with Cersei, kept under close watch. Let the mother keep her child in quiet seclusion, far from the seat of power. Ned nodded. That is justice enough. Stannis' eyes hardened. Justice requires more, but the realm bleeds enough. If we took their heads, half the kingdom might protest. Peace is the priority. A wave of applause and cheering servants drowned further conversation. Soldiers banged their shields. Courtiers wept tears of relief. Sansa and Arya stood on the sidelines, hugging each other. Ned beckoned them closer. They bowed to the king, who acknowledged them with a slight nod. Arya's grin was irrepressible. Sansa's face shone with quiet joy. The days that followed were a whirlwind of celebrations and official pardons. Lords from all corners of Westeros made their way to King's Landing to pay homage to King Stannis. Tywin's envoys arrived, signing treaties that stripped the Lannisters of certain rights and required large sums to rebuild the riverlands they ravaged. The tension was not gone, old grudges died hard, but the immediate danger of a cataclysmic war had passed. Ned found a moment of solitude late one night, walking the ramparts of the Red Keep. The city stretched below, lamps twinkling like fallen stars. A gentle sea breeze brushed his hair, carrying distant laughter. He thought of the narrow escapes that had led here. Had Peter Baelish chosen treachery at that crucial moment, Ned would likely have died, the realm would have plunged into chaos, and his daughters would have been at the mercy of the Lannisters. Instead, here he was, alive, his family intact, the realm at peace under a rightful king. He closed his eyes, breathing in the night air. The memory of Robert's laugh came to him, echoing across the years. He hoped, somewhere, his old friend was at peace, seeing that his heir by law, Stannis, sat the throne instead of a cruel boy of false parentage. Ned whispered a prayer to the old gods for guidance for the future. Footsteps sounded, and he turned to see Peter Baelish approaching, hands clasped behind his back. The flickering torchlight danced on his features, throwing them into sharp relief. Lord Hand, Peter said. Or shall I say, Lord Stark, hero of the realm? A smile tugged at his lips, light as a mocking breeze. Ned gave him a measured look. What do you want, Baelish? Peter's expression shifted, almost wistful. Merely to observe how things might have been had I done something differently. A single choice, a single betrayal or loyalty can change the fate of kingdoms. He leaned on the parapet, glancing at the city below. You have your life. The Starks have their place. The Lannisters bend the knee. Is it everything you hoped for? Ned followed his gaze. I sought only to do what was right. The realm is spared a worse war. Peter's quiet chuckle sounded. Indeed. I suspect we might all find new opportunities in peacetime. Finance, trade, governance, the rebuilding can be lucrative for those who know where to look. Ned turned to him fully. Peter, I know your ways. Whatever your ambitions, do not sow discord. The realm has had enough bloodshed. Peter's voice was mild. I have no intention of destroying this new peace. I flourish in stable times as well as chaotic ones. In fact, a stable realm under a thrifty king like Stannis might need a cunning master of coin more than ever. Ned studied him for a moment. You might be right, but if you ever threaten my family... Peter held up a hand. Perish the thought, Lord Stark. I've had enough of dancing on the edge of the knife. Perhaps I shall cultivate the royal treasury now, watch the gold grow, line my pockets suitably. Isn't that what a good master of coin does? Ned said nothing, the distant hush of the city filling the silence. In truth, he understood that Baelish was a serpent, but one that, for now, slithered in the same direction he did. He turned back to gaze over King's Landing, flickering in the moonlight. Just remember, Peter, he said softly. The North remembers. Peter's smile was faint. The North always does. They parted ways, each retreating to his own thoughts. Ned descended from the ramparts, heading for his chambers. Sansa and Arya would be asleep. Tomorrow, he would write to Catelyn, urging her and Robb to return to the city for a grand reunion if King Stannis permitted. He missed his wife. He missed the quiet of Winterfell, though he knew he would remain here in King's Landing as Hand for some time. Honor demanded he finish what he had started. War was ending and a new era under King Stannis was dawning, shaped by the loyalty Ned had risked everything to uphold. He entered his solar. Moonlight spilled across the desk where his letters and seals lay. The hush of night closed around him, and for a moment he imagined hearing the faint cry of a dire wolf in the far distance, ghostly, comforting. He thought of his home, of the crypts beneath Winterfell. He had chosen to come south for the sake of duty. Now, perhaps he could restore the Seven Kingdoms to some measure of justice. All because, in that pivotal moment, Peter Baelish had not turned on him. Because the City Watch had thrown its lot in with the truth and not with a lie. A slow, deep breath left his lungs. He felt the old gods guiding him as though their unseen presence offered a nod of approval. He whispered a prayer. For Winterfell. For the realm. For honor. And so Eddard Stark passed the night in calm reflection, the faint starlight drifting across the silent chamber. His story, the realm's story, was not yet finished. But for now, in this world where Littlefinger had not betrayed him, there was hope that Westeros might endure in peace, a realm no longer bound in the cruel shackles of deceit and usurpation. Honor, once left to die in the shadows, had found a path to guide the Seven Kingdoms toward a dawn that promised, if not perfect justice, at least a kinder fate. Night had settled deeply over King's Landing, turning the city into a mosaic of flickering lights and long, winding shadows. On the high ramparts of the Red Keep, Eddard Stark gazed out at the faint glow of the moonlit horizon, thinking of how close the realm had come to destruction and how a single choice had steered them toward a far less bloody fate. But though the war was won and the realm was bent to King Stannis Baratheon's rule, Ned knew that true peace would demand more than the signing of treaties and the exchange of vows. It would require diligence and unwavering commitment, and in that he was not alone. If the last few months had taught him anything, it was that alliances could be forged between the unlikeliest people when necessity called. Even so, the hush that stretched around him felt precarious. Below, the city still felt restless, filled with men recently returned from war, merchants trying to recover their fortunes, and small folk uncertain of whether the new king was any kinder than the old. The rumors swirling about Stannis Baratheon's piety, his stern nature, and this new Red Priestess at his side gave many reason to watch and wait rather than celebrate. Nevertheless, no one could ignore that the Lannisters' open defiance had been put down, that Tywin Lannister, once the most feared lord in the Seven Kingdoms, was forced to kneel, and that Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen were no longer positioned on the throne. Ned exhaled a breath into the cool air, recalling with visceral clarity the day the City Watch had chosen to support him instead of the false king. It felt like a lifetime ago. He turned from the parapet and made his way back inside. The corridor torches sputtered as he passed, and guards in Baratheon colors saluted him with polite deference. It was still strange to Ned to be called "My Lord Hand" so frequently, even though he had held Robert's office months before. That had been under an entirely different sky. Everything then had carried the tang of tragedy. Now, the realm recovered beneath a victory that, while hard-won, at least promised a future free of the sort of horrors that might have descended had Joffrey claimed the crown in full. With that in mind, Ned felt the slightest measure of hope. He returned to his chambers to find a lamp burning low. A half-finished letter lay on his desk, one intended for Catelyn, who was still in the Riverlands alongside Robb. The news was bright: peace in the west, the Lannisters brought to heel, and King Stannis' triumphant return to King's Landing. Already, lords from across the realm were making their way to the capital to swear oaths of fealty. The conflict that had threatened to fracture the Seven Kingdoms was, for the moment, quelled. But small, vexing details still needed sorting. In the north, Robb had already begun the trek home from the Riverlands with whatever men had remained under his banner, but he moved carefully, not yet trusting that every pocket of Lannister riders had heard the news. Catelyn, meanwhile, worked to ensure that her father, Lord Hoster Tully, approved the peace terms hammered out at Riverrun. No doubt she grew impatient to rejoin Ned and bring their daughters together with Robb, Bran, and Rickon at Winterfell. Ned's quill hovered over the parchment. Sometimes his words felt too small for the emotions behind them. The sense of relief, the pride he had in his wife and their children, the weariness that settled in his bones from the burden of war, it was all so entangled. Finally, he jotted down the last lines. "We remain safe here. Sansa and Arya long to see you. The new king's rule is stern but stable, and the city no longer trembles at the whim of lions. Return as soon as you are able, for I would have us all together again at Winterfell once my duties as hand are seen through. Until then, I hold you in my heart." He sealed the letter and pressed his ring into the warm wax. A quiet knock sounded on the door. One of the servants arrived, bowed, and took the letter to be delivered to the maester for sending. Ned thanked the boy and eased himself into a chair with a weary sigh. The night was late, yet sleep remained elusive. Memories of the war, of Robert's last hours, of the Lannisters' menacing hold on the city, those things still haunted him. But hope remained a strong salve, and the knowledge that Sansa and Arya slept down the corridor, safe, comforted him. Eventually, he let exhaustion claim him. Come dawn, the city bustled with renewed life. Ned, rising early, found that he couldn't help but notice the transformation from the dark days when Cersei held sway over the Red Keep. Traitors, freed from the fear of a sudden purge by the Lannisters or the chaos of uncertain rule, once again crowded the city's markets, hawking wares with shouts and calls. The gold cloaks, now reorganized and loyal to the new king, kept order. Beggars lingered on street corners, but relief efforts had improved. New shipments of grain from the Reach arrived, the Tyrell alliance ensuring that King's Landing would not starve. All around, there was a sense of precarious optimism. Ned dressed, pulled on a dark leather doublet pinned with the direwolf sigil, and made his way to the council chambers. He had grown somewhat used to this routine, meeting with the rest of the small council, hearing the king's directives, and then carrying out the realm's administrative tasks. Serving his hand under Stannis, though, was a different experience from serving under Robert. Where Robert had been genial but often inattentive, Stannis was always present, always watchful. At times it was refreshing, there was no dithering about tournaments or feasts. At other times it was like walking on brittle ice. Stannis did not abide in efficiency, and he had little patience for what he deemed frivolity. Ned did his best to keep the peace between a king with a flint-like sense of duty and a court that needed to breathe every now and then. The council doors opened to reveal a large table with high-backed chairs. Varys was there already, hands folded in his ample sleeves, greeting Ned with a smile that never touched his eyes. Peter Baelish stood by the window, ignoring Varys, as was his custom, his expression neutral but for a slight upward curve to his lips whenever Ned appeared. Grand Maester Pycelle tottered in next, accompanied by a young novice carrying a heavy stack of parchments. Ser Barristan Selmy took his seat with measured calm, and soon after, King Stannis himself entered. He wore a dark doublet adorned with the flaming heart and crowned stag sigil that he had adopted as his own, over older plate battered from weeks of battle. The lines around his mouth and eyes were set deep. A new presence joined him, Lady Melisandre, the Red Priestess whose mere nearness made others uneasy. She stood in a corner, saying nothing, her long red robes pooling on the floor like blood. All eyes turned to Stannis as he set down a heavy stack of scrolls. Our first item, he began, in that clipped, precise manner that always reminded Ned of a cold wind. We have lords arriving in the city in droves to swear fealty. Their petitions must be heard. Some come seeking justice, wrongs inflicted during the war. Others come seeking offices or boons. I will not sit all day listening to them. The matters must be ordered, arranged in sensible fashion. Ned nodded. We can create a schedule. Ser Barristan and I can preside over some of the lesser disputes to spare you from trifles. The truly significant cases can be brought to you personally. Stannis grunted. Good. Next, Tywin's men continue to station themselves in the Westerlands, though they remain under the Crown's command now. We have word that Ser Jaime Lannister has not returned to Casterly Rock, but is instead roving. It seems he parted from Tywin's forces after the final defeat. Varys offered a small bow of the head. My little birds say Ser Jaime moves in smaller companies, perhaps searching for ways to undermine your grace's rule. I cannot confirm his location precisely, only that he is not idle. Stannis's mouth pressed flat. We want him captured. The Kinglayer is a threat as long as he wanders free. Lord Hand set bounties. 1,000 dragons for any man who brings him alive for justice. In the name of the crown, let it be known that Jaime Lannister's crimes in violating his oath to Aerys Targaryen and later conspiring against the rightful Baratheon line cannot go unanswered. A pause met that. Ned felt a twinge of conflict. Jaime Lannister had saved his life during the Greyjoy Rebellion, once upon a time, by standing with the king's forces. Yet Jaime had also harmed Ned's men in the streets of King's Landing when Ned began investigating Robert's bastards. He had knocked Ned from his horse, injuring him. The man was a paradox, an arrogant swordsman with occasional flashes of something else. Nonetheless, Ned would not defy a lawful command. As you say, your grace, Ned replied. I will dispatch heralds to the corners of the 7 kingdoms. 1,000 gold dragons for Jaime Lannister alive. Baelish cleared his throat. The crown's treasury can manage the expense of the bounty, though I might suggest we confirm the funds for such a large sum. We are still recovering from King Robert's generosity in tournaments. Stannis shot him a cutting glare, but Ned intervened. We will find a way, Lord Baelish. This matter is of prime importance. Very well, Peter said with a languid shrug. Next, the king turned his gaze on the Grand Maester. What are the shipments from the Reach? Are we properly supplied for winter if it falls soon? Pycelle, his voice quavering, ran a finger along his notes. "We have ample stores for the city, your grace. Lord Tyrell has pledged additional shipments in the coming months. If the realm stays at peace, we should manage, though no one knows when the longer seasons might turn bitter." Ned recalled the words that Northerners lived by: winter is coming. It was an ever-present truth he had grown up with, though the Southern lords often treated it as a distant concern. With the war ended, Ned felt an urgency to restore order and prepare for the hardships that might loom. Yet, if the realm truly held together, they would weather the storms far better than if it were fractured into warring factions. Stannis nodded curtly. "See to it that the distributions are done fairly. No bribery, no favoritism." He pivoted his attention to Ned. "Lord Hand, you'll oversee the process yourself if need be. I won't tolerate corruption in this new administration." Ned agreed, glancing momentarily at Peter Baelish, who offered no immediate retort. The master of coin only fiddled with a signet ring as though thoroughly bored. Then a small silence fell until Varys, with that unctuous calm, spoke once more. "There is another matter that might be of interest to the council, your grace," whispered Zephyr. "OM across the narrow sea. The Targaryen girl, Daenerys Stormborn, who wed the Dothraki Khal some time ago, apparently has survived her husband's death and hatched dragons." Ned stiffened slightly. He had dismissed those rumors as the tall tales of travelers. Dragons had been gone from the world for over a century and a half. But the mention of them often put the realm's rulers on edge, especially after Robert's rebellion ended the Targaryen line, save for those rumored exiles across the sea. Stannis scowled. "Do you truly believe these rumors, Spider?" Varys inclined his head. "I make no claims of certainty, only that the rumors grow more persistent with each ship that arrives from the east. They speak of small dragons newly emerged from petrified eggs, and that Daenerys Targaryen styles herself Mother of Dragons. She moves with a small retinue, though I do not know her location precisely, possibly Karth or somewhere along the Red Waste." Attention settled in the council. Stannis' face remained a grim mask. "Should she decide to bring Dothraki to our shores, it would be war again. We have only just ended one conflict. I will not see another begin. The Targaryens are attainted traitors, sworn enemies of this realm." Ned interlaced his fingers. "We know too little yet to say if she will attempt to press her claim. The Dothraki are said to fear the sea. But if she truly has dragons..." Stannis cut him off, voice snapping like a drawn bowstring. "If she truly has them, we will deal with it. The throne has endured Targaryen madness before. We shall remain vigilant." Melisandre stirred in her corner, her red hair gleaming in the torchlight. She seldom spoke in council, but her presence was a reminder of Stannis' new beliefs. She regarded the lords with her knowing eyes, though she said nothing. There was something in her expression, like someone who had read the pages of a book before the rest. Ned suppressed a faint shiver. He did not trust her, and yet Stannis found her counsel valuable in matters he called the will of the Lord of Light. No one spoke further on Daenerys Targaryen that day. The session ended soon after. The king rose, his posture upright but fatigued, and left with Melisandre in tow. One by one, the counselors trickled out. Only Peter lingered with Ned, flicking a glance toward the hand's table. "That was briefer than I expected," Baelish said, leaning a hip against the table's edge. "Our king has no taste for politics unless it involves war. Now that the war's done, he bristles like a bored dog. Will you be the one to amuse him, my lord?" Ned closed the ledger. "If he bristles, it's from the frustration of ruling a kingdom that must be rebuilt after the Lannisters and others wrought havoc. I do not envy him the task." Peter shrugged as if it hardly mattered. "Well, if you need coin for the new storehouses, or for reinforcing the city watch, come to me. My door is always open. I prefer a realm at peace, personally. Far more profitable." Ned gave a curt nod. He still found it difficult to gauge Peter's sincerity, but so far, Baelish had not shown signs of undermining the new rule. He had gained substantial influence by supporting Ned, so perhaps it made sense he would continue to do so. And with King Stannis' unwavering sense of justice, if Baelish tried anything, he might find himself in a cell. Perhaps that threat alone kept him honest. That afternoon, Ned convened a gathering of the city's senior Goldcloak officers in the Tower of the Hand. He wanted to ensure that the watch was well provisioned and to double-check their loyalty. The men who had stood with him months ago had proven their reliability, but new recruits had come under the impetus of the new regime. A rotating door could invite infiltration by Lannister diehards or Sellswords who cared only for gold. Janos Slint, who had once commanded the city watch, was gone, dismissed by Ned for his questionable ethics and replaced by a more honorable officer named Halbert Green. Green was an older knight from the Crownlands who had served with quiet distinction for decades and was known to be incorruptible, if somewhat dull. That sort of dullness, Ned found, was exactly what he needed. "Lord Hand," said Green, bowing stiffly, "we have 3,000 men at arms in the city watch, not counting the newer arrivals. Equipment is stable. Lord Baelish procured funds for new armor and Pike's discipline remains strong." Ned gave a mild smile. "I am glad to hear it, Commander. Keep your eyes open for malcontents from within. If any Lannister loyalists speak of sedition, do not let it slide. But also refrain from brutality. We've had enough blood spilled." Green placed a fist to his chest. "As you say, my lord." Their conversation was cut short by another knock at the tower door, a messenger from the outer gates. He delivered a sealed note to Ned. Breaking the wax, Ned recognized the scrawl immediately. It was from his wife. He excused the guards and read, "My beloved, we have crossed the Trident without incident. Robb travels with me now, having left a portion of our men under the command of Roose Bolton to maintain peace in the Riverlands. Your daughter Sansa's betrothed, if there is to be one, remains a subject of speculation among some lords we encountered, but I assured them we have no arrangement beyond your counsel. I will speak to you on that matter when we are reunited. We near King's Landing with hopes to see you soon. I miss you dearly, and the children, Bran, Rickon, long for word of their sisters. May the gods keep you in health and strength. Catelyn." Ned felt a great warmth spread through his chest. Catelyn was coming. So was Robb. And, if the roads remained free of bandits and trouble, they might arrive in a matter of days. In his mind, he could picture their reunion. Sansa rushing to her mother's arms, Arya bounding around Robb with uncontained energy, full of questions about their brothers. For a moment, the swirl of politics, the threat of distant dragons, and the tense presence of Melisandre all melted away, replaced by a simple, profound relief. Perhaps, at last, he could show them the capital in a safer light with a stable king, though King Stannis was no less forbidding in his sternness. He stepped outside to breathe in the fresh air of the courtyard. The sky was bright with midday sun, and the hustle of King's Landing swelled around him. Stable boys led horses, grooms scurried about with sweaty foreheads, and knights with battered armor moved among the throngs. A few recognized Ned, nodded respectfully, or bowed. Though he rarely courted their esteem, he recognized that the name Stark carried a certain gravity now. He was the man who had unseated the Lannisters from power without turning King's Landing into a battlefield. He was the hand who had let the Queen and her children depart rather than make them bloody examples. He was known for his honor as well as the advantage of the victory that followed. And Ned sometimes thought with a trace of irony some would see him as the man who tamed the spider and the mockingbird Varys and Baelish, though Ned suspected they tamed themselves in the interest of survival. He turned at the sound of small footsteps and saw Arya sprinting across the cobblestones toward him. Behind her, Sansa walked at a more measured pace, flanked by two ladies-in-waiting. Arya skidded to a halt, breathing heavily. "Father, is it true? Mother and Robb will be here soon." Ned nodded, smiling as he laid a hand on her head. She looked older than her years just a few moons ago, but the childlike excitement in her eyes made him glad. "Yes, they are nearing the city." Arya's face lit up. "I have so much to show them. There's the practice yard and the view from the ramparts and—" Sansa, having approached within earshot, lifted her chin with the poise she had honed from too many lessons in ladylike comportment. But her voice trembled with eagerness. "I just want to see Mother again, and know how Bran and Rickon fare in Winterfell." Ned's throat constricted gently at the mention of his younger sons. He wished they were here, but Bran was still healing from his fall and Rickon was too young for the dangers of travel. Winterfell, after all, needed some Stark presence. "It will do my heart good to have us under the same roof once more," he said softly. That evening, Ned instructed the kitchens to prepare for the arrival of his family whenever that would come, be it tomorrow or 3 days hence. He wanted them to be greeted with a feast, though not a garish one that might displease Stannis. He also arranged rooms in the Red Keep suitable for both his wife and son. For Robb, it might be his first time in King's Landing since he was a boy too young to remember. Ned wanted him to see that the capital was not merely a den of vices and intrigues, though it had been that more than once. The next few days were a swirl of typical duties. A dozen lesser lords petitioned Ned for the settlement of disputes ranging from boundary lines to accusations of raiding. Knights from the Vale had arrived, offering their swords in service of King Stannis. Ned learned that his sister-in-law, Lisa Arryn, would remain in the Eyrie with her son, Robert, too fearful to come down from her mountain fortress. This did not surprise him. Lisa had grown more and more reclusive, trusting only in her own domain. Still, the Vale's knights were welcome. And then there was the matter of the crown's debts. Robert had once owed millions of gold dragons to the Iron Bank of Bravos and to other lenders, and though part of that was repaid by Tywin's forced tribute, House Baratheon's royal finances would need careful shepherding for years to come. Ned tackled each problem methodically, mindful that King Stannis expected results. Stannis had little skill for nuance in diplomacy. He wanted the lords to obey, the taxes to be collected, the laws to be enforced. Ned did what he could to balance the king's demands with the reality that forging alliances required some give and take. In the back of his mind, the letter from Catelyn glowed like a beacon, reminding him that joy was on the horizon. Finally, the day came. Ned was in the throne room conferring with Lord Rosby about trade tariffs when word reached him that Lady Catelyn Stark and Robb Stark had arrived at the city gates, escorted by a band of river knights and a handful of Northmen. Ned did not even apologize to Lord Rosby, so eager was he to see his wife and son. He simply concluded the conversation with a curt vow to revisit the matter and strode from the throne room, cloak billowing. He moved as swiftly as dignity allowed, mindful of not actually running through the corridors. Outside, in the main courtyard by the Red Keep's gate, he saw them at once, Catelyn dismounting her horse, pulling back her hood to reveal auburn hair touched lightly by streaks of silver. She looked travel-worn but as regal as any lady in Westeros. And at her side stood Robb, grown taller than she was, with broad shoulders, wearing a plain leather jerkin over a mail shirt. His hair was a touch redder than Ned's own, his eyes lit with the quiet intensity of a young wolf. Northmen in stark livery stood around them, along with a few knights bearing the Tully Trout of Riverrun. At the sight of Ned, Catelyn's face broke into a brilliant smile. "Cat," he said, voice low and thick with emotion, crossing the courtyard. She made to sink into a polite curtsy, but he gathered her into a warm embrace. In that moment, the war, the intrigue, the burdens of the realm, all of it melted away, replaced by the fierce contentment of simply holding the woman he loved. She murmured his name, and then they stepped back, still holding hands. Robb stood close, a slight grin tugging at his lips. "My boy," Ned said, turning to him. "You're nearly a man grown." Robb, 17 now, nodded. "Father." His voice had the deeper timbre of adulthood. He dipped his head in respect, then clasped Ned's forearm in a warrior's greeting. "It's good to see you alive. We feared for you when the city was in danger." "No more danger now," Ned assured him, though he remained mindful that the realm was never truly free of threats. "I'm proud of you, Robb. I've heard tales of how you led our men with honor in the Riverlands." Robb's cheeks flushed slightly. "I did what was required. Mother helped me negotiate with the Freys, though they're as prickly as an old hedgehog. We avoided confrontation and joined with the Tullys when necessary." Catelyn's hand squeezed Ned's. "Come, my love. We must see our daughters. I cannot wait another instant." He smiled. "Yes, of course. This way." They gathered their retinues, leaving some stable hands to see to the horses and baggage. Entering through the gate and across the courtyard, they passed through the corridors of the Red Keep. Intricate tapestries, the hush of servants bowing as they moved, the lingering smell of resin from torches. Catelyn took it all in, her posture tense with the memory of the last time she had been in King's Landing, under far more ominous circumstances. Robb, too, surveyed the castle's corridors with an appraising gaze, as though noting each vantage point where an ambush could occur. He had spent enough time in the field by now to sense danger in a fortress he did not fully trust. But when they reached the solar where Sansa and Arya were waiting, formality dissolved in an instant. Sansa let out a cry of joy and rushed to embrace her mother, tears shining on her cheeks. Arya barreled into Robb, hugging him fiercely around the waist. Ned stood aside, heart full, watching his family reunite. Servants withdrew discreetly, leaving them a moment of privacy. Catelyn ran her hand over Sansa's hair, murmuring relief that she was safe. Arya hung off Robb's arm, peppering him with questions about battles and the roads they had traveled. Catelyn then drew Arya into a hug as well, and at last, the tightness of Ned's own chest gave way to unspoken gratitude. They spent the next hour sharing news, Catelyn describing the Tully forces in the Riverlands, the final pockets of Lannister stragglers who had come to accept the new peace, and the state of Riverrun with Hoster Tully's health waxing and waning. Robb recounted the small negotiations they had made to ensure safe passage across the Twins, how Walder Frey had offered only grudging compliance, and how Ser Edmure Tully had handled some local disputes. Sansa tried to describe King Stannis' court, how different it was from the pageantry of Joffrey's environment, the changes in the Red Keep, and how she had spent her days learning more about the city's people than she ever had under the old regime. Arya insisted on showing them her practice sword, needle, proudly proclaiming she was improving under the watchful eye of a new instructor. Catelyn looked mildly dismayed at Arya's continued martial enthusiasm, but Ned stepped in to reassure his wife that he was keeping an eye on their young she-wolf. When at last they paused, Robb's gaze flicked around. "The capital is calmer than I expected," he admitted. "After hearing so many rumors of war and Lannisters in the streets, it's strange to see it so busy with ordinary life." Ned nodded. "We were fortunate. Avoiding bloodshed was a matter of timing and chance, and no small help from the City Watch. And from Peter Baelish, of all people." He shook his head faintly. "But we still have much to mend. King Stannis rules with a firm hand. That for now keeps the city in order." Catelyn's expression hardened. "I am grateful for the peace, but Stannis has never been known for kindness. I hope we do not trade one tyranny for another." Ned lowered his voice. "He is not his brother, it's true, but he upholds the law. As hand, I will temper him where I can, as I once did for Robert." Catelyn placed a hand on his arm, searching his eyes. "Then we shall stand together in that. I won't allow any harm to befall our family again." He kissed her forehead. "Nor will I." They dined that evening in the smaller hall rather than the vast throne room or the great hall, wanting a more private affair. A subdued banquet had been prepared: roast duck, trenchers of fresh bread from the newly arrived grain, honey-glazed carrots, and spiced wine. Sansa and Arya sat beside Catelyn and Robb, happily chattering. Ned found a seat at the head of the table with them, ignoring the usual protocol of formality a royal dinner might demand. At one point, as they laughed at Arya's retelling of how she had bested a squire in a spar, Ned glanced around the table and realized it was the first moment in many months that he felt truly at peace. Whatever trials lay ahead, the Starks were together, or nearly so. Bran and Rickon waited in Winterfell, but the majority of them were here, unbroken by the horrors that had once threatened to tear them asunder. A day later, King Stannis hosted a formal court session in the throne room, and the presence of the entire Stark family was requested. Ned had informed Stannis of their arrival, and the king, ever conscious of appearances, sought to acknowledge them publicly, particularly Robb, who had been instrumental in containing Lannister raids in the Riverlands. When the appointed hour arrived, the throne room filled with lords, ladies, knights, and highborn spectators, all curious to witness the reintroduction of House Stark. They made an impressive sight. Ned in a dark cloak with the dire wolf sigil on the shoulder, Catelyn in a simple but elegant gown of gray and white, Sansa by her side in a gown of ivory silk, and Arya wearing a more modest dress than usual, though with a wooden practice sword still tucked unobtrusively into her belt, much to Catelyn's dismay. Robb wore a stark gray surcoat over mail, the embroidered dire wolf standing out on his chest. The Manderleys, Umbers, and other northern lords in the city came to show their support, standing behind them as they were presented. King Stannis sat upon the Iron Throne, posture upright, a new crown upon his brow, simple spires shaped like flames, a nod to his new sigil of the flaming heart crown stag. Melisandre stood off to one side, scarlet robes pooling around her feet. Ser Davos Seaworth, the king's newly made Lord Admiral, stood at Stannis' right. Ser Barristan Selmy was present as well, a constant fixture in the throne room these days. The herald's voice carried through the hall: Lord Eddard Stark, Hand of the King and Lord of Winterfell, with his family of noble lineage, come to pay respects and present themselves at the seat of the Iron Throne. They advanced. Ned led the way, stopping at a respectful distance to bow. Catelyn and the children followed suit, each inclining their heads. Stannis regarded them, impassive. "Rise, Lord Stark," the king said, voice echoing in the vaulted chamber. He gestured to Robb. Young Lord Robb, I understand you have served the realm well, halting Lannister reavers in the Riverlands. Robb lifted his head, meeting Stannis's gaze squarely. I did my duty, Your Grace. We only sought to protect our people and bring peace. A faint grunt from Stannis. Duty indeed. For your service, I confirm you as the rightful heir to Winterfell after your father, and I grant you leave to return north with your men once your presence is no longer required in the south. The north has been key to securing this realm. Robb bowed again. Thank you, Your Grace. Stannis' eyes flicked to Catelyn, Sansa, and Arya. He gave them each a brief nod, no more. There was no warmth in it, but there was respect. You are welcome here. Let it be known that House Stark stands loyal to the crown and the crown stands. In thanks to House Stark, a murmured acknowledgement rippled through the courtiers. Sansa's cheeks flushed with a quiet pride. Arya resisted the urge to fidget. Ned exhaled silently, relieved that Stannis had shown them courtesy. In a realm once dominated by the spectacle of the Lannisters' golden lions and Joffrey's cruelty, it was a striking reversal to see the Starks greeted with official approval rather than suspicion. When the formalities concluded, the king moved on to hear other matters. The Starks withdrew and Ned guided them to one side where lords from the north approached to greet them, while riverlords loyal to the Tullis nodded respectfully to Catelyn. Peter Baelish, too, swept forward in a graceful bow, praising Lady Catelyn's safe arrival with flowery words that made Arya roll her eyes. Catelyn's courtesy was polite, though guarded. She knew Peter's history and remained wary of his flattery. Varys drifted nearby, offering his own brand of mild compliments, though he seemed more interested in gleaning gossip from the new arrivals. Meanwhile, Melisandre watched from her corner, occasionally letting her gaze linger on the Stark family, though her expression remained unreadable as ever. Once the court session ended and Stannis withdrew, Ned and his family departed the throne room. As they strolled back toward the Tower of the Hand, Catelyn commented softly, "It feels strange to stand in that hall without hostility. The last time we gathered there under a king's gaze, it was Robert, all boisterous and half-drunk." Ned allowed a small chuckle. Robert was never known for his restraint. And yet I miss his laughter more than I can say. Robb frowned. This new king, he is hard. I sense he's not the type to let things pass lightly. Are you certain it's wise to stay here, father? Winterfell needs you too. Ned sighed. I must remain until Stannis is firmly established, at least for a time. The realm can ill afford another upheaval. Besides, the north is in good hands with our bannermen. Lord Manderley, Lord Bolton, and the rest know their duties. We'll return home eventually, but for now, my place is at Stannis' side. Robb nodded slowly, though a trace of concern lingered in his eyes. If you're sure. At that, Arya piped up, when can we go home? I miss the Godwood and my brothers, and I want to ride my horse across the open fields again. Sansa looked torn. I've grown to like some parts of King's Landing. The dresses, the music, the shopping in the markets. But yes, I miss Winterfell too. It's quieter there. Catelyn drew them to a halt, smoothing a hand over Arya's unruly hair. We will go home when we can. But for now, let's be thankful we are all safe. The war is ended and the city is at peace. That is more than we dared to hope for months ago. Ned couldn't have said it better. He ushered them forward, back into the Tower of the Hand where a meal awaited and the promise of a quiet evening together. Across the city, the bells tolled softly for the dusk prayers. This time, the tolls did not herald any funerals or ominous proclamations, but a simple close to another peaceful day in the capital. In the week that followed, Ned juggled the demands of governance with his desire to spend time with his wife and children. Catelyn accompanied him to certain meetings, lending her keen diplomatic mind when dealing with riverlords or with the last pockets of rebellious Lannister bannermen. Robb took an interest in the training yard, and King Stannis eventually requested that the young heir of Winterfell join certain war councils as an observer, presumably to assess his potential if any future conflict arose. Sansa received an invitation from Margaery Tyrell, who was still present in the city as Stannis' newly betrothed queen-to-be. Though Sansa had never imagined a queen who carried herself with such subtle poise, Margaery was rumored to be a bit more gracious than Stannis might be. Indeed, Margaery invited Sansa to a small gathering of ladies in the queen's chambers. Sewing, music, and conversation. Catelyn encouraged it, thinking it wise for Sansa to have some acquaintances at court that were not overshadowed by the darkness of Joffrey's betrothal. Sansa, at first anxious, agreed in hopes of forging a new perspective on court life. Arya, for her part, wanted nothing to do with sewing circles, preferring to spend her hours with the master-at-arms, or sneaking off to see if she could find her old dancing master, Sirio Farrell. The latter had vanished during the upheaval, but rumors suggested he might still live somewhere in the city. Arya insisted on searching for him, though Ned discouraged her from wandering the streets alone. All the while, news trickled in from beyond the city walls. Some northern bannermen departed for home, having seen enough of the south. The Vale's knights who had come for the war's resolution found themselves uncertain whether to remain at court or return to the Eyrie. Lord Tyrell's envoys pressed for details regarding his daughter Marjorie's wedding to Stannis, when and where the ceremony would take place, what alliances would be granted, and so forth. Ned orchestrated a meeting between the Tyrells and the king, during which Mace Tyrell made an extravagant display of loyalty, while also hinting that he expected new trade privileges for the Reach. Stannis, for his part, remained cordial but firm, refusing to promise more than was necessary. Ned mediated, discreetly ensuring no ill will brood. One morning, as Ned concluded a meeting with Master of Laws Renly Baratheon, who had chosen to remain in the city for the time being, a new raven arrived from the eastern seas. Varys brought the letter himself, sealed with the wax of a Braavosi trading guild. He offered it to Ned with a hint of excitement dancing behind his eyes. Ned broke the seal, scanning the lines. It was from a merchant who had traveled through Karth. The letter repeated the same rumors Varys had mentioned. Daenerys Targaryen traveled with 3 young dragons, though not as large as the beasts of old Valyria. She had gained a small following, freeing enslaved peoples in the lands she passed. Some cities saw her as a liberator, others as a conqueror. The letter did not mention any plan to cross the sea to Westeros, but it did say Daenerys spoke often of a destiny to reclaim her family's throne. He gave a low sigh and looked at Varys. The rumors persist, it seems. Varys bowed. Indeed, my lord hand. She remains across the narrow sea for now. Ned drummed his fingers on the table. If she ever sets sail with dragons at her side, the realm will tremble. We are in no state for another war so soon. Varys nodded sympathetically. No doubt King Stannis will have a stern response if that day comes. Yet she may linger in Essos indefinitely, building her strength among the free cities and beyond. And if she garners enough support? Ned mused aloud. The Golden Company, perhaps, or other Sells word companies. Old Targaryen loyalists, even in Dorne, though Prince Doran Martell has remained quiet. This could foment trouble. Varys spread his hands in a gesture of helplessness. Trouble is the coin of the realm, my lord. We trade in it daily. That evening Ned reported the news to Stannis in private council. Stannis scowled, knuckles whitening around a goblet of watered wine. If she sets foot on Westerosi soil, we will not stand idle. She is an outlaw by birth, a threat to the rightful line. Dragons or no dragons, the Baratheon crown will not yield to Targaryens again. Ned studied the new king's expression carefully. Daenerys' father was mad, but she may not be the same. War with dragons is no small thing, your grace. Perhaps we can remain watchful without inviting panic. If we levy direct threats against her now, it might drive her to alliances that otherwise would not occur. Stannis' jaw flexed. I will not let her think she can claim what was Robert's and now mine. Still, we wait for her next move, then respond. So be it. Melisandre, standing behind Stannis, observed Ned with an unreadable gaze. When Stannis glanced her way, she only murmured, "The Lord of Light shall reveal all in time," and left it at that. It was enough to make Ned uneasy, but he pressed no further. At least the king did not advocate immediate assassination attempts, as Robert once had. Perhaps Stannis saw the futility of trying to dispatch faceless killers across the sea, especially if dragons truly soared at Daenerys' side. For now, the threat remained distant. In the days that followed, Ned devoted himself to a new responsibility, overseeing the massive repairs needed in the Riverlands, which had been ravaged by passing armies. Stannis had tasked him with coordinating the realm's efforts to rebuild roads, restore farmland, and offer compensation for property destroyed. This had never been done on such a scale, but Ned believed it was essential if the crown hoped to maintain loyalty. The Lannisters were forced to pay heavy reparations as part of the peace settlement. The gold would be channeled into these projects, ideally giving the small folk reason to see the new king as a just ruler rather than a harsh overlord. Catelyn's counsel proved invaluable here, for she understood the Riverlands intimately. She and Ned penned letters to the Tully bannermen, urging cooperation and promising partial restitution for their losses. As for Robb, he found himself spending time with some of the king's knights, learning from them about southern battle tactics. He was forging a quiet friendship with Ser Loras Tyrell, who, despite early tensions, recognized Robb's skill and potential. They occasionally sparred in the yard, drawing spectators who whispered about the Wolf of the North and the Knight of Flowers. Loras was graceful and swift with his lance and sword, while Robb fought with a strength tempered by northern grit. They parted with bruises and grins, building the sort of respect that transcended their different backgrounds. Yet not everyone in King's Landing welcomed the peace so wholeheartedly. One crisp afternoon, as Ned walked the outer ward with Arya, she was pleading for more sword lessons. He glimpsed a disturbance near the gates. Riders in black, armed with bows, had entered the courtyard. Their leader, a wiry man with a wry grin, dismounted and started barking orders at the gold cloaks. Curious, Ned approached, Arya trailing behind. He recognized the man by the pinned crow emblem on his tunic, a messenger from the Night's Watch. At first glance, Ned thought it might be someone he knew from Castle Black, but this was a new face. He introduced himself as Kedge Whitehawk, a ranger bearing word from Lord Commander Jeor Mormont. Kedge bowed stiffly, eyeing Ned's attire. "My lord, I come with letters from the Wall. Urgent matters that require the king's attention." Ned's brow furrowed. "Has something happened beyond the Wall?" Kedge's expression grew dark. "There have been reports of more sightings, white shadows, the dead walking. Wildlings are gathering in numbers we've not seen in years. The Lord Commander begs the crown for men and supplies. Winter is coming indeed." Arya's eyes went wide at the mention of dead men walking, but Ned only felt a cold swirl in his gut. The others, the White Walkers, stories he had once thought were no more than old wives' tales and chilling fables, were rumored to be stirring. He recalled the terror that had touched him when he learned of the death of Waymar Royce, the rumors from Old Bear Mormont about strange corpses rising. That had been overshadowed by the realm's civil strife, but now it demanded attention again. Ned nodded grimly. "You will speak to me as Hand of the King, and then we shall petition his grace for a hearing. Come with me." They made their way inside, Arya listening closely despite Ned's attempts to gently dissuade her from hearing all the horrors. Kedge recounted rumors of entire villages in the far north that had vanished, bloodless bodies found with limbs shattered. He spoke of Mance Rayder, the king beyond the Wall, rallying wildlings from all corners of the frozen shore and the haunted forest as if in preparation to flee some greater terror. The Night's Watch was stretched thin, lacking the manpower to patrol all 700 miles of the Wall effectively. Jeor Mormont had sent out ravens to every corner of the realm, but responses were meager. Too many lords had been consumed with the Baratheon-Lannister conflict. Ned felt a chill in his bones. He dismissed Arya gently to go find her mother, and then escorted Kedge Whitehawk to a private solar where they continued the discussion in depth. Kedge produced letters signed by Lord Commander Mormont, detailing the dire need for men, the possibility that the old tales of the others might be real. Ned read the words with mounting unease, remembering that winter might indeed bring horrors beyond the telling. War among men had ended, but perhaps a far more ancient conflict loomed in the north. When Ned eventually brought the ranger to a meeting of the small council, the reaction was mixed. Grand Maester Pycelle harumphed, scolding that these sounded like old wives' tales. Varys offered polite expressions of concern, but kept his tone neutral. Peter Baelish seemed almost amused, as if the notion of walking corpses was a fable that could not possibly disturb the flow of city coin. Only Ser Barristan appeared troubled, his honor-bound soul receptive to the possibility of a greater threat. Stannis, upon hearing the full details, scowled in skepticism. "And you wish me to dispatch an army to the Wall, based on old stories?" the king demanded, hands gripping the arms of the Iron Throne. Kedge Whitehawk swallowed but stood firm. "Your Grace, we only know what we've seen. The wildlings are afraid of something. They speak of cold spirits, white as bone. We have found bodies that do not stay dead. Even if you doubt the others, the Night's Watch is too few in number to hold back a horde of wildlings should they cross in search of refuge." Stannis glared, glancing at Ned. "Your counsel, Lord Hand?" Ned weighed his words carefully. "The Night's Watch is the first line of defense for the realm. Even if this talk of others is but rumor, the threat of wildlings in force is real enough. If the Watch collapses, thousands of wildlings might pour across the border. I recommend sending at least some reinforcements, men who can fight, along with supplies. Let us show that this crown defends the realm from all threats, not just from the houses who defy us." Stannis leaned back, exhaling. "I will not squander half the realm's armies on a fable. But the Watch is an ancient order that even Aegon Targaryen respected." "Very well, eh? Draft an order to gather volunteers and penal recruits from the crown's dungeons. Offer them the choice of the black. We will also release some grain shipments for the Watch. but I will not empty the treasury or the armories without more proof." Ned nodded, understanding the king's reluctance. "Thank you, your grace. I'll see that the order is carried out." Kedge Whitehawk looked relieved. It was more than he'd hoped for, apparently. He bowed low, promising the Night's Watch's gratitude, and retreated from the throne room to convey the news to the wall. Still, Ned could not shake the feeling that it might not be enough. If the others truly stirred, a small influx of conscripts and criminals would be a poor shield. But at least it was something. On that note, the realm pressed on. Stannis' betrothal ceremony to Margaery Tyrell was scheduled to take place in the Great September of Baelor within a fortnight. It was not a wedding yet, merely a formal announcement before the Faith of the Seven. This arrangement alone showed that Stannis understood politics enough to tie himself to House Tyrell. The alliance had already proved critical in crushing Tywin's armies. Now it would be solidified by marriage. Margaery Tyrell was young, graceful, and beloved by many. She had a knack for winning hearts, which Stannis sorely lacked. Ned found himself hoping that Margaery's warmth might soften the king's edges a little, or at least keep the court from stagnating under his unyielding rule. Preparations for the betrothal ceremony turned the city lively once more. The Tyrell bannermen arrived in fine livery. Roses were woven into garlands hung across the thoroughfares leading to the Great September. Musicians from the Reach mingled with the capital's performers. All the while, Stannis maintained a stoic front, continuing his daily routine of councils, judgments, and martial displays as though the betrothal were merely another battle plan. Margaery received well-wishers with composed smiles, forging acquaintances among the ladies of the court, Sansa included. The gloom that had once clung to King's Landing under Joffrey's reign was giving way to cautious revelry, though overshadowed by the king's severity. On the appointed day, the Great September's crystal towers caught the morning light, splashing rainbows across the marble steps. A crowd of small folk gathered outside, kept at bay by gold cloaks. Within, lords and ladies in their finery filled the pews. The High Septon presided at the altar, flanked by septas, their heads bowed in reverence. King Stannis arrived in dark attire, a golden seven-pointed star pinned to his breast to show respect for the faith, though the Red Priestess lingered in the background, her mere presence a silent reminder that Stannis favored Lawler. Margaery Tyrell was radiant in a gown of pale green, embroidered with gold roses and vines. She knelt beside the king as they exchanged their vows of betrothal. A simpler ceremony than a full wedding, but still solemn in the eyes of the faith. Ned stood near the front, with Catelyn by his side, Sansa and Arya just behind. Robb joined them, carefully observing the spectacle of southern pageantry. Peter Baelish hovered on the opposite side, close to the Tyrell retinue, whispering sly comments to Lord Mace Tyrell every so often. Ser Loras stood near his sister, playing the role of supportive brother with polished grace. When at last the High Septon completed the blessings, Stannis rose, taking Margaery's hand. Applause reverberated through the September. Ned clapped politely, thinking how strange it was to witness this union, so different from the flamboyant festivities Robert would have orchestrated. Margaery curtsied, a shy smile on her lips, and Stannis nodded, stiff as ever. Yet the court seemed satisfied. With the Tyrells now firmly woven into Stannis' reign, the last major threat of disunity was at bay. The crowd funneled out of the sept to gather in the courtyard below, where musicians struck up a bright tune. Tables laden with sweet pastries and chilled wine awaited. Ned led his family out, drifting toward the open air. The city's lords, flush with good humor, offered toasts to the new alliance. Arya wrinkled her nose at the sweet mead, preferring water. Sansa sipped politely, exchanging pleasantries with Margaery's ladies. Robb found himself in conversation with older knights who asked about the war in the Riverlands. Catelyn mingled with the Tully bannermen. Ned took a moment to stand aside, letting his eyes survey the crowd, ensuring no trouble brewed. He was joined by Renly Baratheon, who wore a thoughtful expression. Renly raised a goblet, swirling the wine. "Quite the spectacle, isn't it? My brother's betrothal." Ned inclined his head. "It is a necessary step for the realm's unity." Renly's mouth curved in a wry smile. "Margaery is a good choice. She's charming, canny. She'll gather the heart Stannis cannot. My brother is about as warm as Wintersteel, but if Hey, produce an heir, it will cement his line. The Tyrells will be bound to the crown for another generation." Ned nodded. And thus, the realm might know peace longer than a few months. Renly sipped his wine. You sound as though you half expect another storm. Ned cast a glance up at the shimmering sky. I do. The Targaryen girl in Essos may be one. The threat from beyond the wall might be another. The realm is large and peace is fragile. Renly's smile faded. True enough. Still, let us enjoy what respite we have. Shall we raise a cup to that? Ned managed a small, polite laugh. Yes. To respite. They touched goblets and drank. The music played on, and for a time, King's Landing felt almost carefree. Banners flapped in the mild breeze, bearing the crowned stag and the golden rose side by side. The small folk looked on from a distance, curious but not fearful, while lords and ladies danced or indulged in sweet summer wine. In that moment, all the battered corners of the realm seemed far away, their troubles overshadowed by the promise of stability. Yet, even as Ned watched, he found his gaze drifting to the Red Keep's walls, the spires of the Great September, and beyond, to the roads that led north. He thought of the wall, the uncharted territories of the far north, the hush that might harbor nightmares old and unnamed. He remembered the letter from Karth, the rumors of dragons stirring in a distant desert. Peace was precious. Peace was precarious. A single stroke of fate had spared the realm from Joffrey's madness, and they had used that reprieve to defeat Tywin's rebellion. But how long could these blessings last? He reminded himself, for now the realm was safe. For now his daughters laughed, his son grew stronger, and his wife stood by his side, unbowed by grief. For now, the memory of Robert Baratheon lived on in a better outcome than the one Ned had once feared, a stable kingdom, a rightful king, albeit a stern one, and no more children torn from their families by a false claim. That was worth cherishing, however fleeting it might be. A month passed in relative quiet. As harvest season neared, the fields around King's Landing came back to life, fed by seeds purchased with Lannister gold. The City Watch expanded its patrols, ensuring that lawlessness did not creep into the capital as new refugees arrived from war-torn regions hoping for a better life. Stannis' reign took hold. A new royal council was formalized, with Ned as hand, Renly as master of laws, Peter Baelish continuing as master of coin, Varys as master of whisperers, and Ser Davos Seaworth newly named master of ships, a post he filled with unpretentious practicality. Ser Barristan Selmy stood as Lord Commander of the King's Guard, now a more robust brotherhood with new knights selected for merit rather than favoritism. The day soon came when Robb Stark with his retinue prepared to depart for the north. He had lingered longer than expected to learn from the southern knights, but now winter stores in the north needed oversight. Catelyn elected to remain in King's Landing a bit longer with Ned and the girls, but gave Robb her blessing. The morning he left, Ned accompanied him to the city gates, giving him a final embrace. Write to me, Ned said, and let me know how the rebuilding goes. You'll stop at Winterfell first and see Bran and Rickon. Tell them they are always in our hearts. Robb nodded, trying to stifle the emotion in his voice. I will. The next time we meet, I hope it's at home with the entire family. Ned couldn't help but sense how tall and sure Robb had become, no longer a boy with a wooden sword. With a final smile of farewell, Robb mounted his horse, leading a column of Northmen out of the city. The banner of the dire wolf fluttered behind him, drawing the gazes of onlookers. Sansa and Arya stood nearby, waving with subdued excitement. Catelyn watched with a mother's mixture of pride and sorrow, though she consoled herself that it was not a final parting. If the realm stayed peaceful, they would all be together at Winterfell before another year passed. But fate can be fickle. The raven that arrived a fortnight later bore a new mark, Dorne's Sunanspear seal. Ned broke the wax in the presence of the king, reading it aloud with gathering concern. Prince Doran Martell wrote to say that his watchers on the southern seas had sighted Dothraki ships, smaller vessels, likely captured or purchased, heading west along the southern coast of Essos. Rumor claimed that Daenerys Targaryen might have convinced a few Khalasar remnants to follow her in search of safer lands. It was unclear if they aimed for Dorne or some other landing, but the movement was worrisome. The letter was cautious but concluded that Dorne would remain vigilant, urging the crown to do the same. Stannis' lips tightened. So the Targaryen girl stirs at last. Ned lowered the parchment. She may not come here at all, she might go to Slaver's Bay or the Basilisk Isles or who knows where. But Prince Doran is right to warn us. Stannis turned, his voice stern. Even if she lands in Dorne with a handful of Dothraki, that is a threat. Let us not forget she claims the throne. We must prepare. So began another wave of tension. By the time the news spread through the court, speculation abounded that Daenerys Targaryen was building a force of Unsullied, that she commanded witches who controlled dragons, that she was betrothed to some foreign prince. The rumors overlapped and contradicted each other. Through it all, Ned's caution deepened. They had barely ended one civil war, another was the last thing the realm needed. Still, days came and went without any additional confirmations of Dothraki landings. Dorne's coast remained uninvaded, and the Stepstones, the chain of islands in the Narrow Sea, did not report any dragons overhead. It was possible Daenerys was traveling further south, or that the rumor was false. The uncertainty weighed on King Stannis' mind, fueling further instructions to the royal fleet to patrol the Blackwater Bay and beyond. Ser Davos took up that duty, though he was frank with Ned that they had limited ships. The Royal Navy had not fully recovered from the casualties of recent wars. Meanwhile, the quiet progress of life continued. The betrothal between Stannis and Margaery moved forward with wedding plans set to occur at Storm's End in the spring. The city's small folk found a fragile sense of normalcy. Markets thrived on new produce from the Reach. Street performances regained a measure of color, and jest no longer reigned in by fear of Joffrey's cruelty. Sansa took lessons in music, eager to improve her singing and harp playing, often in company with Margaery's ladies. Arya, on the other hand, was often found in the stables or the practice yard, determined to hone her swordsmanship. Catelyn oversaw charitable efforts in the city, distributing bread to orphans and wounded veterans. Ned thought often of Winterfell. Would the day come soon when Stannis felt secure enough that he, Ned, might take his family home for good? He hoped so. But for now, as Hand of the King, he had sworn to uphold the realm's laws to serve Stannis. And no matter how he felt about Stannis' rigid demeanor, he acknowledged that the realm was better off under a stern but lawful king than the monstrous boy Joffrey would have become. Late one afternoon, as Ned prepared to meet with Peter Baelish regarding a new round of funding for the City Watch, he heard a commotion in the yard. Stepping outside, he saw two gold cloaks half leading, half dragging a scrawny man who fought them with surprising ferocity. The man spat curses in a guttural accent. He wore ragged clothes that looked as though they'd been scorched, and upon his shoulder was a patchy attempt at a dragon tattoo. Ned's heart lurched. What manner of outlander was this? Before Ned could inquire, the man whipped out a short dagger from somewhere in his rags. In a heartbeat, a gold cloak bashed him on the temple with a pommel. He collapsed unconscious. The guards wrested the dagger away. Ned strode forward, ordering them to be gentle, not to kill him. "Who is he?" Ned demanded. One of the gold cloaks panted, "Says he's from the east. We found him lurking near the docks, raving about dragons and a Khaleesi. He drew steel on us when we questioned him." Ned's blood turned cold. "Take him to the dungeons, but keep him alive. I'll question him myself." That evening, with torches flickering against the stone walls, Ned ventured into the Red Keep's dungeons. The man sat in a cell, half-lucid, nursing a bruise on his temple. By the rank smell, he'd likely not bathed in weeks. His hair was dark, matted, and he had the lean, wiry build of one who'd known too many days without a full meal. A jailer accompanied Ned, while two gold cloaks stood guard outside. Ned spoke quietly. "I am Eddard Stark, Hand of the King. You said something about a Khaleesi?" The man's eyes narrowed. He spat at the straw. "You'll kill me anyway. All you stinking lords do." Ned shook his head. "If you cooperate, no harm will come to you." The prisoner bared his teeth. "Khaleesi is Daenerys Stormborn, the moon of my life. I was blood of her blood, but we were attacked in the Red Waste. I was separated. Ended up with slavers. Escaped them in Volantis. Stowed away on a ship, ended up here." Ned felt a jolt of recognition. He was indeed one of the Dothraki, or at least someone who had traveled with them. The man's next words tumbled out in a frantic rush, half in the common tongue, half in Dothraki. He spoke of Daenerys leading a small band of loyal riders traveling far to gather strength. He claimed that dragons had hatched and that he'd seen them with his own eyes, small as hounds, but growing fast. Ned pressed him to describe the dragons. He said they were scaled in black and red, green and bronze, pale cream. They breathed flame that could blister flesh. Daenerys wore them perched on her shoulders like winged omens of rebirth. Swallowing back unease, Ned asked, "Is she sailing here?" The man's face contorted. "She goes where she wills. She says the Iron Throne is hers by right. Slavers, false kings, she will break them all. She seeks ships, armies. When the dragons are grown, no city can stand against her." Ned strove to keep his voice calm. "But is she coming now?" "Don't know," the man hissed. "I lost her. She has loyal men, good men. I was cast away. All I know is what she said, when my children are grown, we will sail to the place that was stolen from my family. She calls it her birthright." He subsided into a coughing fit, glaring at Ned as though expecting a blow. Instead, Ned nodded to the jailer. "See that he's fed and has water. I'll return soon." Outside, the corridor felt stifling, the torch smoke lingering in stale air. Ned pressed a hand to his brow, wrestling with what he had just learned. If Daenerys truly had living dragons, each day that passed gave them more time to grow. Even a small force might become unstoppable with adult dragons. Could the realm truly face that once more? He brought this news to King Stannis immediately. Stannis paced the floor of the council chamber, eyes blazing with anger. So it is confirmed she has dragons. We can no longer dismiss the rumors. Ned leaned on the table. The question is when she will strike and how. If she's wise, she'll wait until they are fully grown. That could take years. We can prepare, fortify, gather knowledge of how dragons might be countered. Stannis slammed a fist down. Damn it all. We must root out this threat before it grows. My brother Robert was right to try to have them killed. Ned inhaled sharply. Robert was talking of slaying a pregnant girl. We can't act so rashly. At least not until we know more. And even then, is it wise to cross the sea in pursuit of an uncertain foe? Stannis glowered. Better to meet them before they become unstoppable. But we lack the ships for such a campaign. Our forces are depleted. Tywin's rebellion drained our coffers. The Tyrell alliance is still new, and I will not risk them sailing off on some half-mad expedition. He turned abruptly to Melisandre, who stood behind him. What say you? The Red Priestess's voice was soft, full of mysterious conviction. I see many flames flickering. One threatens to burn the realm if left unchecked. Dragons are fire made flesh, and they are not the fires of the Lord of Light. Stannis scowled. So we do nothing? Melisandre's red lips curved faintly. We wait and watch. The time has not yet come for open war across the sea. If the Lord of Light wills it, an answer will present itself. The true war, I sense, lies elsewhere, far to the north, in the land of endless night. Stannis looked at her with an expression that mingled frustration and trust. Then we strengthen the realm here. I'll not let Targaryens or others slip in unchallenged. By the time Ned left that council session, he was exhausted. King Stannis was correct that the realm could not easily mount a campaign across the narrow sea, not with finances so recently battered and the full ramifications of the war still settling. Yet the threat of a future invasion loomed, and with each passing day, the North reported stranger tales of White Walkers glimpsed by the wildlings. Ned could almost feel the pressure building from both ends of the map, Daenerys Targaryen in the east, the others in the far north. And in the middle, King's Landing, the seat of a king determined to preserve his rule through unwavering discipline. Still, life in King's Landing did not freeze in place. For Sansa, new experiences beckoned. She was invited to a small gathering that included Margaery Tyrell, Asha Greyjoy, who had arrived with a small delegation from the Iron Islands to discuss trade, and several other ladies of note. Arya continued her stealthy efforts to hone her swordsmanship, occasionally aided by a new Braavosi swords master who had shown up claiming to be a friend of Syrio Farrell. Ned insisted that she at least complete her daily lessons on proper manners and reading before going off to the yard. Catelyn helped coordinate shipping routes with the River Lords, ensuring that repairs to war-torn hamlets remained on schedule. Each day felt like an exercise in precarious balancing, as if the entire realm walked a tightrope stretched over the pit of potential chaos. Weeks slipped into months. The climate shifted toward autumn, crisp air creeping in at dawn. Ned stood often on the ramparts, gazing north, wondering about the swirling changes that might be happening at Winterfell. Letters from Robb spoke of an uneventful journey home, a warm reunion with Bran and Rickon, the quiet pride of the North at House Stark's role in preserving the realm's peace. In one letter, Robb mentioned that the nights were growing colder more quickly than usual, and that the old men of the North muttered about a harsh winter on the horizon. Ned read that, closed his eyes, and recalled that those old men had lived through the last long winter. He prayed this next one would not be worse. In King's Landing, talk of Stannis' wedding grew. The date was set for early spring at Storm's End, once the roads were passable for a large traveling entourage. Mace Tyrell insisted on a grand event that would rival any Targaryen wedding of old, though Stannis wrinkled his brow at the cost. Peter Baelish assured him that the spectacle was necessary for winning hearts, especially in the Stormlands, which had yet to fully embrace their new liege. Ned personally thought a simpler ceremony would do, but recognized the need for southern pageantry. Margaery Tyrell, in the meantime, toured the city with a gentle smile, distributing alms to beggars, listening to the concerns of fishmongers, forging a bond with the people that Stannis lacked. Whether out of genuine compassion or calculated strategy, Ned could not say, but it worked. The small folk adored her. They called her the Rose of the Realm. As for Ned's own family, Sansa began to speak with timid hope of returning north once the wedding was done, or at least visiting Winterfell. She missed her brothers. Arya echoed the sentiment, though more loudly and with fewer courtesies. Catelyn saw how Ned was torn. To remain his hand was his duty, but the North called to him. She took his hand one evening and said quietly, "When Stannis is wed, we might propose that he allow us leave to Winterfell, at least for a time. I'm sure we can keep a small presence here if the king needs counsel." Ned listened, the tension in his shoulders easing. He realized how strongly he longed for the quiet of the Godwood, for the gray stones of Winterfell, the hot springs that wreathed its courtyards in gentle mists, the distant cry of dire wolves at night. "Aye," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "After all we've endured, we deserve that." The days slid by, each echoing with the undercurrent of distant threats but blessedly free of immediate crisis. Then, in the final month of autumn, Ned received a raven from Castle Black. He read the letter alone in his solar, his heart pounding. Lord Commander Mormont wrote of a great gathering of wildlings in the haunted forest, tens of thousands under the banner of Mance Rayder, preparing to move south. Strange rumors claimed that Rayder sought to lead his people away from something dreadful, the White Walkers. The Watch was outnumbered many times over, with only the wall between them and the wildling host. Lord Commander Mormont called once more for aid. Ned set the parchment aside, tension knotting his jaw. Here it was, the real test of whether the realm would stand behind the Night's Watch or dismiss the threat as wildling trouble. King Stannis might be forced to act or see the North swarmed by refugees and invaders. The next day, Ned brought the letter to the king in council. Stannis read it, passing it among the others. Silence hung over the table. "How many men can the Watch field?" asked Renly, brows drawn. Ned replied, "Fewer than 1,000. Many are green recruits." Pycelle harumphed. "Perhaps the wildlings will scatter on their own. They're a disorganized folk." Stannis glared at the old maester. "If Mormont says there are tens of thousands, we cannot ignore it." He looked at Ned. "Can the North handle them alone?" Ned took a slow breath. "Potentially, if we muster. But that would draw many men from their lands as winter looms. We could do it, but the cost would be high, and if these rumors of White Walkers are true, we face a threat beyond anything we know. Better to reinforce the Watch at the wall than to let the wildlings pass into the gift and farmland of the North." Stannis' gaze flicked over the others, Baelish, Barristan, Davos, all wearing grim expressions. Melisandre, watching with her inscrutable eyes, nodded once as though she had expected this. The king rapped his knuckles on the table. "Then we send men. I will not have my realm threatened from the north or the east. Enough. We do not need the entire southern host, but we can muster a contingent, men from the Stormlands, some from the Crownlands. The Tyrells might balk, but it's time they contributed to the realm's defense beyond coin." He gestured to Davos. "Begin preparations. We'll send a royal decree to our loyal lords requiring levies to be raised. Ser Barristan, you will help coordinate. Lord Stark, you will accompany them north as you know the land and the Watch's needs." Ned straightened. This was no small request. It might well delay any chance he had of returning to Winterfell for a quiet reunion. But honor demanded he do his part. "I shall do so, your grace." Stannis nodded in curt approval. We'll not march the entire force to the wall in the dead of winter, but we can send a portion soon, before the first snows. Enough to reinforce the Watch, hold the gates. If Mance Rayder tries to cross, we'll meet him at the wall itself. And so, as autumn's final leaves fell from the blackened trees around King's Landing, the realm braced for yet another expedition, this time not to quell rebellious lords, but to face the unknown beyond the wall. The letters went out by Raven, commanding lords to send men north. Many complained or tried to delay, housefly among them, citing old age and a lack of resources. But the royal seal bore weight, and the knowledge that King Stannis would not abide defiance compelled them to cooperate. Catelyn took the news with the stoic acceptance of a wife who had long stood by her husband's duty. "Then we go north together," she said, pressing her lips to Ned's cheek. "I will not remain behind this time." Sansa, wide-eyed, asked if that meant they were finally returning home. Arya whooped with delight at the idea of traveling to the north. Ned, feeling a swirl of pride and apprehension, explained that this was no mere homecoming, it was a military matter that could turn dangerous. But the girls, stubborn as Starks, insisted on accompanying him. He decided it was safer to keep the family together rather than leave them vulnerable in King's Landing if the Targaryen threat suddenly manifested. Stannis made no objection, concerned mainly with reinforcing the Watch. They spent days packing and preparing. The City Watch captain was left in place, loyal to King Stannis. Peter Baelish, with the rest of the council, would remain in King's Landing to oversee finances and the wedding preparations. Renly, though initially reluctant, agreed to stay behind as well to keep the capital stable. Varys, ever the whisper-gatherer, would remain near the seat of power. Ser Davos would coordinate the shipping of supplies up the eastern coast, where they could sail around the Bight to White Harbor, then send them overland. The Tyrells provided wagons of grain and dried fruits, though they complained about the cost. In the end, the muster was smaller than Ned might have wished, but it was something: a few thousand men from the Stormlands, Crownland's levies, and a smattering from the Vale and the Reach, led by lesser knights. Enough to bolster the watch, hopefully. Finally, the day of departure arrived. The sky was gray with a hint of chill, the first breath of winter creeping into the south. King Stannis stood on the steps of the Red Keep, flanked by Melisandre, to bid farewell to the departing column. He offered a curt handshake to Ned, who bowed. "Hold the north," Stannis said, steel in his tone. "If the wildlings or worse cross that wall, we'll have a war of a different kind." Ned nodded. "We will hold it, your grace." Marjorie Tyrell, who stood slightly behind the king, gave Ned a polite smile of encouragement. Then Ned turned, mounted his horse. Sansa and Arya rode in a carriage with Catelyn, though Arya would rather have been astride a horse. The men from the Crownlands, along with a few knights sworn to Storm's End, formed ranks behind them. Banners fluttered: the crowned stag, the dire wolf of Stark, the flaming heart of Stannis. The gates opened wide and they rode out into the city, greeted by onlookers who cheered or stood silent, uncertain. The plan was to head north along the King's Road, gathering additional small contingents from loyal lords as they passed. White Harbor would supply ships for heavier cargo, and from there they would press on to Castle Black. As the parade of men and wagons clattered through the streets, Ned looked up at the proud red walls of the city one last time. He recalled the day he had first arrived with Robert, how different the city had felt then, cloaked in illusions and secrets. Now, at least, truth held sway at the Red Keep, with Stannis on the throne. Yet a sense of finality hung in the air. Ned suspected he might not return here for a long while, if ever. The Game of Thrones continued and the realm had new threats, but he was done playing pieces in the south. His duty lay in the north, where winter loomed. They crossed the city gates, heading up the King's Road. With each turn of a wheel, the sense of both dread and hope grew. Would the wildlings attempt a direct assault on the wall, or was their threat overshadowed by the silent approach of the others? Would Daenerys Targaryen sail across the sea, dragons blazing, forcing Stannis to shift his forces south again? Ned could not say. All he knew was that his path led north. If the others were real, if winter was truly coming in all its fury, then the only hope for the realm was unity and courage against the darkness. He prayed that the realm, spared from Joffrey's tyranny and at least partially rebuilt, stood a better chance to face what lay ahead. And perhaps, just perhaps, the choice Peter Baelish made months ago, a choosing not to betray Ned in the throne room, had given Westeros the fighting chance it would need when ice and fire inevitably collided. They rode on, the wind whispering through skeletal trees. The children of the forest, the old gods, the new gods, he prayed to them all for deliverance. But no matter how the future shaped itself, Ned Stark remained steadfast. Honor and family guided him as they always had. If war came from the north or from across the sea, House Stark would stand. This time, the realm would not be caught unprepared. This time, they would meet the coming storm head-on, guided by a truth that could no longer be silenced. That unity, tempered by mercy, burned brighter than any false crown forged in deceit. And in that quiet conviction, he found the strength to ride on, carrying the fate of the realm upon his shoulders, determined that it would not shatter as long as any Stark drew breath.